Hey everyone, I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you for helping me reach 100 subscribers. I honestly couldn't have done this without your love, support, and constant encouragement. Every like, comment, and subscribe means a lot to me. Now let's keep this journey going. Our next target is 200 subscribers, and I know we can do it together. If you enjoy my content, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let's grow as a family. Thank you once again. After achieving the impossible, Luffy is forced to live on forever. Granted eternal youth against his will, he outlives the pirate era and awakens in a changed world called Remnant, where the seas no longer rule and strength is measured differently. As an immortal pirate king in a land dominated by hunters and grim, Luffy must face a future without his crew, without piracy, and without a place that truly understands him. Yet even in a weaker world, his spirit of freedom refuses to fade, slowly inspiring Team RWBY and others as a living legend who carries the weight of an era long lost. Disclaimer. This story do not belong to me. The author is Remnant's Eternal Pirate by RWBYpiece. Respect to author.
Chapter 1, Chance Encounter. So hungry. That was the voice that civilians had to bear with as they watched a young man drag his feet through town while holding his stomach. They could almost hear the loud growling from his stomach, yet they do nothing to help him with his need for food. The boy was rather short compared to others with his unruly black hair, round black eyes with a scar under the left one, and a straw hat sitting on top of his head. The rest of his attire included an unbuttoned red long-sleeve shirt with a yellow vest over it, black shorts with a crimson sash around the belt, and a pair of sandals. His unbuttoned shirt revealed an X-shaped scar on his chest, which no one could see properly since he's henchman from hunger. His eyes bounced back and forth in a search for anything that looks like a restaurant. The raven-haired boy doesn't have the strength to hunt for his food out in the wild while dealing with the black creatures called Grim. They didn't really pose much of a threat to him, but fighting them just wastes more energy. Energy that could have been used to hunt and eat. His nose twitched as a delicious smell entered his nostrils. In a burst of adrenaline, he perked up and followed his nose until he spotted a building a moderate distance away. With his hunger taking over, he stretched his arms out to impossible lengths and grabbed onto the corner of a building on each side and quickly into the place where his instincts were screaming food. Some of the bystanders freaked out with a scream as he pulled himself back a bit. Gomu Gomu no rocket. He slingshots himself over to the target at breakneck speeds with a huge grin, not caring about the impending crash. Inside the restaurant, 4 people sat in a row at the bar counter in front of the entrance. While they were here on business, one in particular was looking for a good drink. 2 women sat on each end of the row with the 2 men in between them. The woman on the left was easy to distinguish with her white cloak. She has a pale complexion, shoulder-length black hair with red tips, and a unique silver color for her eyes. Her outfit includes a black blouse with a matching skirt, black leggings, and high-heel boots. Resting on her hips were 2 short swords. The blades were curved and there was a ring at the pommel of each sword. The man next to her had short blonde hair with lilac eyes. He wears a brown leather vest over his tan shirt with one of the sleeves torn off in favor for a spalding, a leather band brace with a fingerless glove on his right hand, and a pair of cargo pants. His only accessory was the red bandana on his left arm. Next in line is a man with graying black spiky hair and red eyes with a little stubble. His attire consists of a red tattered cloak, gray dress shirt, black pants and shoes, a crooked cross-shaped pendant, and a few rings on his right hand. On the back of his waist was a long sword with gears in the crossdrawn area. The last person in line is a woman with the same hair and eye color as the previous person, but her hair reached past her waist. She wears a shallow-cut black dress with a red girdle belt, matching gauntlets, several necklaces with beads, detached black leggings, and black leather boots. She's equipped with an odachi with a rotary chamber. The black-haired man received his drink from the bartender before taking a swig from it. The bartender seemed normal with his black vest over his white button shirt. He was bald on the head, but has a thick mustache while his eyes look closed. Honestly, Kira, we're on a mission and you get your fill of alcohol. The woman next to him sighed in exasperation. The drinker, now known as Kira, finished downing his beverage with a content sigh. Come on, Raven, I can't help it if there's a bar section in this joint. Don't be a stick in the mud, sis. Kira waved off. The bartender stared between the 2 siblings as they bickered, finding it a little entertaining. At least until it evolves from throwing words to hurling fists. So what brings you 4 out here? If I had to guess, you're all huntsmen sent here after receiving word of Grim raiding this town. The bartender surmised, earning their attention. The 4 stared at him with weary eyes, wondering what gave them away. They haven't said anything of the sort, yet this one already figured them out. A little too accurate to call a guess, don't you think? The blonde spoke up as he eyed the bald man. Their expressions soon showed confusion when the man chuckled at their suspicions. "I've been here long enough to tell the difference between a person on a search," he said as he stared a glance to him. "And a person searching for refreshments," he finished, giving an accusing stare to Kiro. The explanation disarmed the four of their suspicion, and he doesn't seem the least bit offended. His experience as a bartender gave off the wrong impression, and it came to no surprise with how they reacted. "Right, we're actually huntsmen in training on our 3rd year. I'm Summer and this is Taiyang, and those two are Kiro and Raven. We're Team STRQ, the woman introduced her team. Anyway, we came to you since the chieftain is no longer with us," Summer said in a solemn tone. From the report they were given, the last raid from the Grim was withheld at the cost of their legion. People are growing restless without the presence of a leader, and that can bring Grim. Their job is to alleviate the Grim threat until someone fills in that role. If worst comes to worst, they could evacuate the citizens to minimize losses. Since they can't turn to the chieftain for clues on the Grim's whereabouts, the next best thing is someone that hears a lot of rumors. "Ooh!" The loud shout startled everyone in the building. The 4 huntsmen shot off of their seats and looked around for where the voice came from. Then there are the people who were simply famished, the old man mused with a smile behind his mustache. If the bartender was a betting man, he would take a gamble on someone charging through the door with no control over themselves. So he stepped aside, far away from the area in front of the entrance. As soon as he did, an unidentified object smashed through the doors. Taiyang had his back turned from it as it happened, taking a strike with the small of his back. Kiro's eyes bugged out as his gaping teammate came closer to him, not able to dodge in time. The two flew to the bar counter and crashed through the wall, leading them outside. All of the customers present were stupefied by what transpired. "Kiro! Taiyang!" Summer called out in worry. Raven kept her eyes on the newcomer laying on the ground with her hand on her Odachi. She backed up when the boy sprung back on his feet. "Food place. I finally found a food place." He cheered with a megawatt smile before darting over to one of the tables. Kiro and Taiyang crawled out of the men-made hole they left with grumpy expressions. All eyes were on the troublesome boy chanting, "Food," with impatience. The bartender made his way over to the back door, but was stopped by his own worker. "You can't seriously be thinking of feeding that no good kid, are you, boss?" One of them questioned incredulously. Team STRQ looked at him with wide eyes in surprise at his position. Now that the thought about his age, it shouldn't be a surprise to think that he's in charge. That's what a restaurant is for, is it not? It's our duty to stave off another's hunger, the boss retorted, causing them to flinch and give him a wide berth for him to enter the kitchen. To anyone else, it looks like he was respected by his peers. The boy stopped his childish chanting and shot a glance at the old man, being reminded of someone with those same morals. A hand slammed on the table to get his attention. "Excuse me, shouldn't you worry about how to fix that?" Raven glared at him, jerking a thumb over to the hole. "The last thing they need is some troublemaker bringing more grief to the town." He stared at the spot for a few seconds with a blank expression. "There sure are a lot of weird cute places. All of the ones I went to had a hole like that one," he stated, earning face faults for his stupidity. "You're the one that's been making them." They shouted in unison. "I did," he asked with a raised brow. Any further shouting was cut short as the double doors opened up to reveal many plates of food, much to his joy. "Awesome, that was really fast," he praised before digging into the feast. Summer sweat dropped at the lack of table manners he's showing as he used his hands to stuff his face full of food. Some of it was being devoured whole. He sure has an appetite, she thought. She tilted herself to see that his stomach had not even bulged after everything he ate so far. All she could see was a well-defined six-pack along with the gruesome scar. Realizing where she was staring, Summer stood straight back up, sweating bullets. She only hoped that no one noticed her prolonged stare, not wanting to seem creepy. "You do have money on you, right?" Taiyang brought up, only to get a head shake in response. "And I suppose you're going to dine and dash to not pay." Raven guessed, her hand still on her sword. The blood swallowed whatever food was still in his mouth, which happened to be the rest of it. "Yeah," he told her. They stared on in disbelief at his honesty. Although, he did get a laugh for it. "Hee. I'm glad you didn't even try to lie. Not a lot of honest folk these days," the boss said, now on the receiving end of the disbelieving stares. He does realize that he's being robbed of food, right? "You're awfully mellow about this," Kiro commented. Thinking that she has to take matters into her own hands, Raven drew her sword to reveal a red blade and held it pointing at the youngster's face. She had enough of him being given free rein with no one taking action. "Looks like I have to deal with you myself," she stated with cold eyes. The boy's content face fell into a small frown, unfazed by the threatening blade. The owner lets out a soft sigh, turning forked brows from Kiro and Taiyang. He has done nothing to defend his restaurant from the glutton, and he's just going to let this one go. "Raven, we have a mission to complete," Summer reminded. It was just some food the old man willingly served, and the guy was starving. "If Grim attack the town when they don't have a leader, there won't be a restaurant." "It's fine," the boy assured as he got out of his seat. She drew her weapon, which means she's willing to stake her life in this, he said in a neutral tone before cracking his neck. Everyone except the owner was taken aback by his change in mood. The woman looked like serious business with that sword, yet he doesn't bat an eye. I like this kid, Kiro whispered to Tai, earning an eye roll. If you had the guts to confront his twin sister without fear, you immediately piqued the drunk's interest. He's the one that plowed the two of us through the wall. Tai Yang deadpanned. Tai, we've been flung into a forest of grim by our own headmaster. Becoming one with the wall just came as a surprise. Kiro reasoned, not at all mad about the crash. The owner of the restaurant was stuck in his own thoughts as he stared at the boy. They don't know him like me. They don't see the experience in his eyes. Monkey D. Luffy, even if you don't remember me, it's good to see you again after all these years. The old man thought, completely fine with him not recognizing the old man. He's not necessarily his best friend or anything. He met the boy when he was still an active huntsman in his younger years. He was in a bit of a bind until Luffy bailed him out, saving his life. After that, they hung out for several more missions where he got to learn a bit more about the boy before going their separate ways. Even though it was odd to see that the boy hasn't aged through the years, he left it be for the sake of privacy. That and the answer he would get may be too much to take in. I have a proposition to make. As a way for you to pay for the damages, both on the building and the amount of food, the retired huntsman spoke up, breaking down the tense atmosphere. Everyone turned in rapt attention of how he's going to resolve this. Why don't you help these four with their mission? They're going to be staying here for a while and eliminate any nearby Grim until the next chieftain is worthy. The previous one has an heir, but he's currently filled with self-doubt at the moment, the old man proposed. Unless the heir grows some backbone, he can't take up the mantle. If he were to right now, the citizens would start to lose hope in the town's safety. The entire room went quiet as they took a few seconds to understand what he said. What? Everyone except Luffy exclaimed in shock, especially Team STRQ. They were going to have some random stranger tag along for the ride. Not on their life. I'm sorry, sir. But we should be able to handle this on our own. Summer declined, but he wasn't having any of it. The Grimm probably have noticed the current state of the town. They'll no doubt gather their forces and invade. It won't hurt to have one extra person with you. Besides, I can tell that he's strong. He argued a point, earning quirked brows from the huntsman. He sure has a lot of insight on grim behavior for a bartender. Their vehemence against bringing him along wavered slightly, though they wondered why the wise man had such faith in the boy. Even so, he'll just get in the way. Raven rebuked, pointing to where the boy was. She blinked twice at the outline of his presence before spotting him on his way to the ruined doorway. Yosh, if this gets me out of paying, then I'll do it. Luffy said, mostly to himself. Whether they liked it or not, the Straw Hat Boy was going to join them of his own volition and he's not going to budge. Sis, just let it go. He might actually be a good fighter. Kiro reasoned as he placed a hand on her shoulder. Recalling the tense moment before, the boy looked sure of himself when he was willing to fight his sister. The bartender also has a good eye for people judging from how he figured out their intentions with a look. He's willing to give his accurate insight a chance. He's a carefree child. People like that die young. The serious woman hissed. So we'll watch his back. Kiro countered, earning a growl from his sister. She doesn't understand why he's so gung-ho on the idea. While arguments were waged, Taiyang decided to get a rundown of the boy's capabilities. I see you're a brawler like me, he noticed, trying to spark a friendly conversation. The boy was dead set on hunting Grim with them, so it would be great to get along with their new comrade. You bet. The Straw Hat Kid cheered with a grin, emphasizing himself as a fist fighter by slamming his fist against his palm. Summer lets out a sigh of acceptance before joining the two. You don't know how long it's been since I've seen another brawler. Taiyang punned, earning a series of groans. Luffy tilted his head in confusion since he doesn't know his full name while Raven had a ghost of a smile. Oh right, the name's Taiyang Xiaolong. I was just making a pun out of it, he explained sheepishly, forgetting that he has yet to introduce himself. Realization dawned on Luffy's face before he finally laughed at the pun. What's your name? Summer asked politely. I'm Monkey D. Luffy, the Pirate King, he declared. The people around him had saucer plates for eyes in wonder of either the title or his odd name. Great, we're dealing with a delusional kid. Raven muttered in annoyance. There weren't even any pirates to begin with, much less a king amongst them. Well, it's nice to meet you, Monkey. I'm Summer. Summer introduced herself after snapping out of her stupor. Luffy turned to her with a pout, making her wonder if she said something wrong. Monkey is my family name. Luffy is my first name, he corrected her. Summer rubbed her head sheepishly at the mix-up. So you live under the tradition of your last name going first. Kiro mused, earning a nod from Luffy. Raven was standing around, tapping her arms in impatience. The four saw her sharp expression and thought it would be a good time to leave for their hunt. Oh right, have you heard anything as far as where the Grimm are concentrated? Summer asked the bartender, almost forgetting why they came here in the first place. The old man tapped his chin in thought as he tried to recall any recent news. Some of the guards have mentioned seeing a good number of them hiding out in the east, probably using the foliage to conceal themselves. Chances are the Grimm are farther in, he answered. She acknowledges with a nod before ushering her team and Luffy out the doorway, or what's left of it. The employees watched them leave before addressing the current problems. Sir, what are we going to do about this? One of them asked, hoping that the old man doesn't overexert himself by doing the fixing on his own. His question went ignored, however. Something like this is an easy fix, he assured them as he rolled in a pile of wooden planks with a small bit of metal in front of the damage. Before his workers could argue, he clapped his hands and made a slight glow between them. When he placed the glowing hand on the planks, a bright light blinded them before revealing a new doorway complete with doorknobs and hinges. That takes care of one of them. The boss dusted his hands off, ignoring the shocked stares of those around him. EHH, they exclaimed, their eyes bugging out at what they just witnessed. The old man only chuckled at their dumbfounded expressions. He was like that too when Luffy first showed his stretchy body. The group of 5 scoured through the forest for any signs of Grimm. A part of them wished to just find a nest right away without having to follow a single beast back to its pack. Not really for convenience, but more for the sake of Luffy. The more they see the unassuming boy wander with a huge grin, the less they believe that he's a strong fighter. Just what was the old man thinking? What were they thinking in accepting his help? Take this seriously, Luffy. Raven seethed, her patience wearing thin at his antics. Huh, I'm always serious. Luffy retorted with a pout. You sure don't show it. Kiro commented with a sweat drop. Summer's face lit up as she forgot to ask him something of importance. Something that any fighter against Grimm should have. Do you at least have an aura? She asked in concern. If he was going to fight alongside them, then he should have a shield to protect his body from harm. A little less to worry about compared to escorting someone with none. Nope, Luffy answered simply. Team STRQ stopped in their tracks, paling at the thought of getting him killed in their first skirmish of the day. Why didn't you say something sooner? Summer shouted before placing a hand on him. I'm going to unlock it for you before you end up hurt. Luffy's expression softened at the umpteenth person that tried to unlock his aura. Everyone failed to, hard as they try. Summer began to mutter the incantation that she learned in the academy before she attempted to unlock his aura, only for it to end in failure. What? Why can't I unlock it? She thought, bewildered by such a thing. She knows she hasn't messed up anywhere, yet it still didn't work when she tried again. The red-tipped girl panted in exhaustion after a few tries. Her friends quirked a brow at her state while Luffy had a resigned look on his face. Luffy, what's wrong with your aura? She wondered between breaths. I can't ever have an aura. That's all. Luffy gave a vague explanation, knowing the reason why. Stop kidding around. There's no such thing as an aura that can't be unlocked. Raven said with an incredulous stare. No there isn't, yet something has his aura chained up and sealed away. No matter how hard I try, those chains won't break. Summer explained in detail, which only confused the 3 more. Rustling in the branches broke their train of thought before they looked around for the source. Luffy's eyes widened before wrapping his arms around Summer and leaping out of the way of a Beowulf that tried to pounce on them. That was close, Luffy said with Summer still pressed against his bare chest. She shook herself off of him, embarrassed with the close contact. Thanks. Looks like the Grimm saved us the trouble, she pointed out the obvious. More Grimm entered the scene soon after, surrounding the 5. Summer and Kiro drew their blades while the 2 brawlers got into a fighting stance, ready to take on the horde. Raven stood ready to use the Ido on the first one that approaches her. Much to their shock, Luffy charged at one of the Beowulfs. Hey kid, don't just rush in there without an aura. Kiro chided, but his words went ignored. Clicking his teeth in annoyance, he rushed to the reckless boy's aid. Only for his jaw to drop at the futile notion when Luffy nailed a Grimm in the chest. The Beowulf was sent flying from the force until its head splintered a tree, breaking its neck. Okay, his scrawny arms pack a hefty wallop. Taiyang pointed out in awe, not expecting that kind of strength. When he first learned of his brawler status, he assumed a large part of it was aura manipulation. But that was before hearing that he has no aura. Luffy didn't stop there as he marched through the black beasts, delivering punches left and right. A shiver entered their spine when all they could hear was the cracking of the Grimms, bones for every hit. The men were broken out of their stupor when Raven performed a quick draw to bisect another Beowulf. If you have time to gawk, then use it to kill these Grimm, she berated them. The 2 sighed at the bossy lady before getting to work by either cutting the beasts down, or knocking their heads in. Meanwhile, Summer weaved through the small fries, dismembering each of them with so much as a few strikes. She trips one before bringing up her blade to impale its skull on the way down. Before it could evaporate, she moved the corpse to block a hit from its own comrade. Chains of aura sprouted from her wrist and connected to the ring on the sword not buried into anything. She threw it past to the Beowulf before the blade separated from the hilt and turned to the side, changing into a sickle. Pulling back on the chain, the ring acted as a trigger for the gun jutting out from the hilt. The sickle returned at high speed as it decapitated the Grimm on the way back. She did the same transformation to her other sword before she twirled around to form a merciless typhoon of sickles. Her body danced with acrobatic finesse to keep up the momentum until no Grimm were in her sight. She slowed to a stop and retracted the sickles with her chains when she finished eviscerating the Grimm. Luffy watched the entire show in childish wonder of her movements. That was so awesome, he exclaimed with starry eyes. Summer couldn't help but look bashful at the praise. She wasn't expecting any praise after doing the same maneuvers so often in the earlier years of the academy. It was still welcome all the same. Hey, if I didn't know any better, I'd say you wanted to show off to impress him. Kiro pointed out as he joined them, cutting any creature nearby without looking at them. Summer stiffened at the statement before giving him a sharp look. Like you're one to talk, she shot back, earning an amused grin. Amidst the cheering Luffy was doing, the two noticed an Ursa close in behind the boy. Luffy! They shouted in panic as they watched the Ursa swing its paw at him. Tai Yang heard their shouts and rushed to their aid while Raven clicked her teeth in irritation. They're here to kill Grimm, not babysit some kid who lets his guard down in the middle of a fight. Luffy never stopped grinning as he lowered his body, anticipating the angle of the attack. The thick arm whizzed over him, not even so much as graze him. The Ursa flailed its arms about in anger of the evasive boy, but he's effortlessly dodging them by mere inches with his eyes closed. The three were amazed with his movements. None of it was wasted and he looked as though he knew when and how it's going to attack. Even Raven spared a glance once she cleared out her end. How is he doing that? They wondered in unison. Luffy finally faced the Ursa as it brought down its arm, but the boy caught it by the wrist with his impressive strength. Too slow, he muttered before throwing his fist back far beyond normal limits, shocking the entire team. They thought he said that he doesn't have an aura, yet he's showing a power that defies all logic. Even if it could be a semblance, there was never such an ability that altered your body. Gomu Gomu no pistol. His fist retracted back and slammed into the Ursa's gut, sending it flying out of view. Considering how his normal punches killed the Grimm, it was safe for them to assume that the Ursa died too. The leftover Beowulfs backed away from them to regroup, mostly staring at the rubber boy. They never ran into a human like this before and now they don't know how to respond. The four humans were in the same boat. Why your arm, how did, but you said. Summer pointed at him, unable to form sentences in her flabbergasted state. Her friends stared at him like gaping fish as they failed to grasp what happened. Luffy just laughed at their reactions, finding it very funny. Ha ha ha, I may not have aura like you guys, but I ate a devil fruit that turned me into a rubberman. Luffy explained before stretching his cheeks with his hands. They visibly flinched at the demonstration, still very freaked out that a person with no aura can do that. One thing stuck out in his statement. What the hell is a devil fruit? More importantly, how does one get powers from a fruit? Low growls brought their attention back to the situation at hand. The Wolf Grimm's aggression was focused on the stretchy human, intent on killing him first. Luffy grinned at the dark creatures as he cracked his knuckles in anticipation. I'll take care of the others. Luffy declared with no room for argument. Summer was about to protest, but Tai Yang held a hand out to stop her. I'm actually curious about how he handles himself in a fight now. Just let him, the brawler said. Looking at the twin siblings, they were also curious about how he fights with no aura. Summer lets out a defeated sigh before they got out of the way for the Grimm's target, switching from fighters to spectators. They'll still jump in if he bit off more than he could chew, but for now they really want to see how much he could handle. When the team was in the clear, Luffy rushed at a small cluster of Beowulfs with his fists cocked back. Gomu Gomu no Gatling. Both fists shot forward in rapid succession. To the untrained eye, it looked like the appendages multiplied when it's actually just punches being thrown at a really fast pace. Numerous hits connected on varying parts of the Grimm, from their skulls to their abdomens. Many of them perished during the onslaught. Chuckling at his handiwork, a Borbotusk joined the fray along with a King Taijutsu. The Borbotusk curled up before rolling towards him. Luffy hopped over it and then pivoted his body to avoid the snake Grimm that took advantage of his airborne state. Luffy shot his arms out in a spiral and grabbed the boar Grimm by the tusks and then lifted it off the ground. The arms untwisted themselves to make the Grimm spin rapidly through the air. Gomu Gomu no Tsuchi mallet. The raven-haired boy swung his spinning mallet and slammed it against the King Taijutsu's head. Both died from the impact and crashed into the ground, cratering it. The second head of the snake came into view and lunged at him from behind. He stretched his arm out to grab a tree to reel himself to, dodging the attack. Swinging himself around, Luffy threw himself back at the attacker and caught it by the underside of its neck. He starts to twist his torso vertically before he clasped his feet around the neck. Gomu Gomu no bow gun. His body untwists itself with great speed until the snapback sent the second head skyward, the corpse dissolving on the way down. I win. He cheered, signaling Team STRQ to come out. They were simply impressed with how easy he made them out to be, especially fighting the Grimm alone. He doesn't even look exhausted from what they could tell, and his strength is nothing to mock at if he can one-shot Grimm. The old man was right all along, as suspicious as he might be. Luffy is incredibly strong for a young man. Well, look at you, kid. You made kicking ass look like a chore. Kiro complimented as he patted Luffy on the back, earning a goofy grin. Some part of him said that what Luffy showed was only the tip of the iceberg. He turns to Raven with a look that tells her to say something that needs to be said. She understood what he wants from her, but was still annoyed about admitting it verbally. Luffy quirked a brow at Raven as she contemplates on her words, only to start off with a sigh. I'm sorry for belittling you. I didn't even give you a chance like the others. I thought you were so naive that you didn't belong in a battlefield. Raven said. The strong live and the weak die, that was something she would always agree with. Luffy gave off the vibe that he was too weak to fight Grim. No aura, no weapons, not even his attitude. But that short skirmish proved to her that those things are not what made someone strong. We should apologize too. After all, we also thought little about your experience. Summer chimed in. They thought the same way as Raven, just not as harshly as her. Shishishi, don't worry about it. Luffy waved it off with a smile. Summer gave a small smile in return. We should probably move to another sector before we turn in for the night. Taiyang suggested, looking around to find no Grim. He would guess that Luffy's display got them to regroup, which might make their next encounter more dicey if they're smart enough. I agree, but once we head back into town, you're going to tell us everything about your rubber body. Raven demanded to the boy. Luffy could only shrug in acceptance. Guess they weren't satisfied with just the devil fruit part. Oh, you naughty girl. At least get to know him before learning about his body. Kiro teased. Luffy had no idea what he was getting at, but the rest were burning bright red at the joke. Thwack, you know what I meant. Raven growled out with a raised fist. Kiro rubbed the lump on his head as he snickered. The five left to fight more Grim for the safety of the town. What Team STRQ don't realize is that they have made a friend of immense power. Power that can shake Remnant to its core. Chapter 2, Start of Eternity. Team STRQ and Luffy continued hunting in the east sector until the sun started to set. With nighttime approaching, Grim would be harder to spot with their black fur. Aside from Luffy's rubber body, they also discovered that he utilized every inch of his body as a weapon. Using his arm like a sickle or scythe, outstretching his leg to catch anyone in the way of the whip-like limb, even using his head to cave a Grim's skull in. No amount of training in their lives can accumulate up to that degree. It just wasn't possible. They rented their rooms for the night at an inn when they returned from their outing. The team kept their curiosity from spilling over until the five of them were in one of the rooms they rented, lest they want others to listen in. Phew, that food was good. Luffy said as he patted his belly. While they would agree with him, the team found it odd that the old man just understands Luffy better than any stranger could have. As if he already met him. The rest stayed silent as they made their way to a room for a private chat. As soon as they entered one, Summer locked the door behind her with the key given by the proprietor. Alright Luffy, tell us what you know about these devil fruits. Raven demanded, refusing to beat around the bush. It's been on their minds the entire time ever since he started stretching. But they couldn't take the time for him to talk in the middle of Grim territory. Luffy ruffled his hair before sitting on the floor with crossed legs. Devil fruits are fruits that give a power to the one that eats it, but they taste really bad. Luffy started off, blanching at the memory of how it tasted. The four sweat dropped at the small detail tacked on. A power, so they don't all give people stretchy bodies. Kiro surmised, earning a nod from Luffy. Yeah, there's only one Gomu Gomu no Mi and I ate it. The devil fruits come in 3 types depending on what kind of power you get. Luffy explained, and those would be. Taiyang urged him on. Luffy pouted at him for his impatience. First you got parameshes, which is what mine is. They change your body or your surroundings. You can have a body that can split apart, create doors, grow parts of your body on things. Luffy listed off. They didn't know what to make of the examples other than the fact that the possibilities are boundless with parameshes. Well anyway, you also got zones. They let you transform into animals like a reindeer. But there are also some that let you turn into a phoenix or dinosaur. The boy moved on. A phoenix, Summer exclaimed with stars for eyes. The mere thought of turning into a mythical creature sounded so majestic to the imagination. Luffy chuckled at her amazement before continuing. Finally, you have Logias. They're believed to make you invincible because you become a natural element like fire, sand, or lightning. Attacks just go through them, he informed. Dread best described their reactions to the unfair advantage. You can cut or smash it all you want, you won't actually harm them. Please tell us there's a weakness. Raven hoped. They're weak when they get in too much water, just like every other devil fruit eater. Luffy assuaged their worries. While it was a relief to know it's not completely overpowered, they wondered why it has to be water. Wait, weak to water? Are you saying you can't swim? Taiyang caught on, earning a nod from the rubber boy. Yup, I'd sink like a hammer. I also can't have an aura because I ate a devil fruit. Luffy added. He got some wide-eyed looks from that as they now understand why Summer couldn't unlock his aura. You either have a protective shield, or ditch it for a ridiculous power at the additional cost of swimming. This is neat to learn about and all, but where does one find a mystical fruit? Hell, why haven't we heard anything about in the first place? Kiro brought up. The sudden questions renewed their curiosity. With the number of fruits in general, you'd think this would have become common knowledge. Almost all of them have been thrown into the ocean where no one can get them. Luffy said casually. The four face-faulted at what seemed like a wasted learning experience. What's the point in being informed of this if their chances of encountering one are next to none? Gee thanks. You tell us all these facts that are now useless to us since they're out of humanity's reach. Kiro yelled with shark teeth. You're the ones that wanted to know all about it. Luffy shot back with a tick mark. Groans were met at the argument before something clicked. You said, throne, right. That would mean that people came to that agreement. But, why? Given the right devil fruit, eliminating Grim would be so much easier. Summer pointed out. When considering the potential they carry, the fruits would have trivialized the dark creatures. Her teammates nodded in agreement to her statement while Luffy frowned at the wishful thinking. You really think people would use them to fight Grim? He questioned. They looked at him and tried to form an argument, but they soon saw the many negatives implied. Some may use it for such noble deeds, but it doesn't change that others would abuse it for their own ends. Once someone gets a taste of it, it could change them and make them believe to be able to get away with anything as they're drunk with power. War would have been the worst-case scenario, what with the devastation brought about. So the only thing useful we learned is that Luffy can't swim or have an aura. Raven summed it up. They were stuck in their thoughts until a yawn escaped Summer's lips. I guess we should turn in for the night. Kiro said. Okay. Good night. Luffy said before falling back to the floor sound asleep. He's already asleep, they said in unison with visible shock. Not wanting him to catch a cold, Summer grabbed the spare blanket and draped it over his body. One moment he's a guy with hulking strength, then he becomes a child the next. Kiro commented on the odd person. That aside, there were some things I forgot to ask him. Taiyang said, gaining their attention. Like what? Raven wondered. Where did the devil fruits come from? What happens to them when the user dies? That sort of thing. The blonde brawler named a few. Better yet, how does he seem to know so much about them? It's a complete mystery to us while he knows all about it. Kiro pointed out. It hardly made any sense that Remnant knew nothing of the devil fruits, as if they were forgotten through the ages. Now that they thought about it, they should have asked him those questions. With Luffy's stupidity, he probably doesn't know their origins though. They shelved the topic for another time as they left for their rooms, with Luffy's room designated as the men's. When he opened his eyes, Luffy found himself bound to a bed. What the? Luffy took in his surroundings to see medical tools around him. The place looked a lot like Law's submarine. He tried to break out of the chains binding him, only for his body to grow weak. Seastone cuffs, great. Groaning at the predicament, the boy lays there in confusion until the door opens. Luffy cranes his neck up to see a familiar face. The tall man that entered had dark hair covered by his white fur hat accompanied with sideburns and a scruffy goatee. His hands were tattooed with letters to form the word, DEATH. He wears a yellow t-shirt under his black jacket with a pair of jeans that have dark spots on them. "TRA guy," Luffy called out with wide eyes. TRA guy, or Law, stared at him with a neutral expression. Oi, what's going on here? Why am I stuck here? Luffy demanded an answer from his friend, gesturing to the seastone cuffs weakening the devil fruit user. Law sighs as he's about to talk to the boy one last time. I'm making sure my patient stays still for my final operation. Law answered, earning a quirked brow from Luffy. Huh, patient, I'm not dying, Luffy told him, still very confused with what's going on. He has no recollection of taking an injury severe enough to warrant the need. Now that he thought about it, where's his crew? Where's Law's crew? He doesn't sense their presence anywhere near them. It's just us two, in case you're wondering. Everyone fell asleep after the party anyways. They'll find us later. Now then, Law told him before holding his hand out. Room. A blue sphere expanded from his hand until it covered the entire room. Whatever Law was up to, Luffy knew it couldn't be anything good with the man's devil fruit involved. They were allies though, so he couldn't be thinking of cutting him apart or taking his heart out of his body. Seeing Luffy's expression stiffen, Law figured that he should explain himself to the dense idiot. Ever so slightly, the world is undergoing changes that no one could predict. But Luffy doesn't really pay attention to all of that. I'm going to use the perennial youth operation on you. It will give you the one thing Doflamingo was after, eternal youth. Law told him. It was the main reason why his devil fruit was considered the ultimate fruit, the ability to allow someone to transcend into an ageless state. The same ability that Doflamingo wanted for himself. Gears slowly turned in Luffy's head until he recalled hearing that from Robin. His eyes widened in horror at the power, both for what it could do to him and the user. Law never brought it up because he had no plans on using it. So what changed his mind? Stop. Don't do it. You'll die if you use it. Luffy pleaded in desperation for his friend's sake. It truly would be the final operation for Law, as the technique would trade his life for Luffy's perpetual youth. He doesn't even want to live forever. His life of thrills and adventure would come to an end since his life would no longer end. Where's the joy in life when you have all the time to do it? The worst thing, however, is that he'll be the only one with it. All the friends he has now will eventually grow old and die. He will suffer the one thing worse than death, solitude. I'm not giving you much of a choice here. Law pointed out, gesturing to the cuffs. But why? Why me? What about your crew? Did they know what you're going to do? Luffy's questions bellowed throughout the submarine. Law didn't even flinch at the anger in his voice. Of course they know. I can't hide it from them. As much as it hurts those guys, they respect my decision. Law said. They were able to handle themselves without him back in Zou, so he has no doubt that they'll be fine. Luffy had a look of surprise at the thought of his crew agreeing with their captain. All while knowing that their captain won't ever come back to them. It had to take some serious convincing on Law's part. As for why, well, I'm sure it wouldn't change your thoughts on this. Law mused with certainty. No matter what excuse he makes, Luffy would still be against this. New lands were being discovered at this very moment, even in places where it used to be occupied by oceans. Perhaps the ocean floor is rising above sea level, no one is really sure. Black creatures have also made their debut from deep underground. They seem to have a fixation on killing anyone nearby. Already have small settlements fell to the beasts, and civilization continues to decline. The world government already has its hands full with the revolutionary army, leading to more casualties. It was like an Armageddon out in the world, and the pirate era was withering away. Luffy will most likely be last pirate king to ever live. It'd be a damn shame if it ended just like that. Millions of people, including himself, took up piracy to search for One Piece. Many were killed, deceived, and crushed under some higher authority. To have the title of Pirate King forgotten to time would be the ultimate slap in the face to everyone that pursued such a dream. There's also the will of D to consider. Once they're gone, there won't be anyone to oppose the supposed gods in the world should they ever appear. Time and time again, Luffy has succeeded in defeating them. Law broke out of his thoughts as he refocused on the reason he's here. His hands started to glow at the fingertips as he prepared to stab him with his fingers. Luffy grimaced at the inevitable outcome. He was dead set on going through with it, and he can't do anything to stop him. You mind if I make one request? Law asked the boy. Luffy gritted his teeth at his selfishness. You're giving me something I don't want, and you still want more. Luffy growled out. For the first time during the conversation, Law wore a small smile. He's demanding so much from him after all the times Luffy used him. He would have thought this would call it even. I want you to throw out the op no mi after I'm gone, preferably in the deep sea. The devil fruits have caused too much trouble to be around, and mine is no exception. Law explained his request. Once word gets out that he's dead, the world will be on the lookout for his devil fruit. No doubt so they can also have eternal youth. People had the same idea as him, believing the strange beasts flocked towards conflict over the fruit. Heck, some believe the devil fruits caused them to appear in the first place. Luffy gave a shaky nod in response. He can do at least that much. Now the problem still stands. What are you going to do with One Piece? Law inquired in curiosity. Luffy had a childish pout and turned his head with a HMPH. Well, I'm not going to share it with anyone. It belongs to the Straw Hats. Luffy declared. The two stared into each other's eyes before Law snorted. Ha ha ha, you're such a greedy bastard. Law genuinely laughed at Luffy's answer, almost sounding maniacal. He wouldn't expect less from the Pirate King. We really are the worst generation. We only care about what we want and not give a damn about anything else. Law muttered. He restored his composure, though one could see the mirth from earlier. Well, it's been one hell of an adventure with you, Straw Hat Ya. Dragging my ass around on your whims. But even so, Luffy braced himself at that point. There was no turning back for either of them now. Thanks. His voice came out as a whisper, which was almost missed by Luffy. The surgeon's hand closed in on the Straw Hat Boy's chest. Luffy's eyes shot open in shock, this time in the familiar inn. His heartbeat was fast and his breathing irregular. A little light poured into the room to signal the morning. He wished he had a dream full of meat, not some flashback on what's been done. Law's death, the start of his eternal hell, he didn't need a reminder. He doesn't remember how old he is at this point, even though it wouldn't matter. Since it's just eternal youth, he can still die by any other means aside from aging. The only problem is that he's too strong for this world. Over time, humanity grew weaker after the world's strongest individuals started fading out. Now it's like people can't take an impalement or explosions and shrug it off. Marines like Kizaru or Akainu, the warlords, and even the New World emperors are not amongst the living. The balance of power fell into disarray, which only made the hostile creatures more problematic. Humanity had to pretty much start from scratch and recover from there. However, concepts from back then like hockey and devil fruits were also forgotten. He has no clue what happened to the fishmen, the Minx tribes, or any of the other races for that matter. They could have gone extinct for all he knows. As for One Piece, he thought it would be best to leave it in Raftel. What better place to hide it than the one island that hardly anyone reached? What came back from the ashes of the changed world was aura and dust. The technology is more advanced in some areas. The black beasts that took them by surprise were named Grim. And now their world finally received a name. Remnant. Strangely fitting when you're looking at what's left of the bygone era. Despite knowing that he would still be around by the time the people around him grew old, he still tries to stave off the loneliness by interacting with others. He just doesn't feel the desire to stay with them till the end. In the end, he's only torturing himself. Either he disconnects himself from any interaction and faces solitude, or go through the cycle of brief friendships. Either way, Luffy refuses to commit suicide and escape this. Law made the ultimate choice that he could never back out from, so he'll live to show it wasn't in vain. Besides, suicide is for the weak-willed. After enough reminiscing, Luffy looks over to the two beds that are empty. Taiyang and Kiro must already be up. A deep yawn comes out as he stretches before his stomach growled. Time for meat. Luffy cheered, back to his usual self. He hopped back to his feet, got his shirt on, and ran to the door. He almost crashed into Summer as he opened it, startling the girl. "Oh, Summer, where are the others?" Luffy asked. "They ate without you. I guess they wanted to eat in peace instead of you nabbing food from their plates," she told him with an accusing stare. Luffy starts sweating bullets as he puckered his lips to the side and averting his gaze. "I don't know what you're talking about." Luffy blatantly lied. He's such a bad liar. Summer's sweat dropped at his expression. Recalling what she saw when she peeked through the door, Summer had to ask him. "Luffy, are you alright?" Summer inquired with worry. The way he woke up looked like he had a nightmare. "Hopefully, he'll talk about it." "I'm fine," Luffy answered with no hesitation before leaving for some grub. Summer looked downcast for keeping it personal. Granted, they only met yesterday. Breakfast was uneventful and silent with Luffy finishing his food in seconds. "Seriously, do you have to inhale the food like a vacuum?" Taiyang wondered as the five wandered through town. "It's like you were starving for years," Kiro commented with a roll of his eyes. Luffy just ignores the two as he rubs his belly in satisfaction. Soft murmurs caught their attention. They spotted a small crowd whispering to themselves. When is he going to get his act together? I know he lost his father, but more families will be lost if he doesn't do something. We have a team of huntsmen for now, but it's only a matter of time. Having heard enough of the gossip, Luffy and the others continued on their way. Discontent with its citizens, huh? Grim or sure to notice, just like the old man said. Kiro said. Luffy had a thoughtful look on his face, humming at an idea. "Nay, where's the important person at?" Luffy asked suddenly. Team STRQ quirked a brow at him. "He should be at the chief's residence." "Why do you ask?" Raven wondered. As straightforward as he is, she wouldn't put it past him to persuade the heir directly. Luffy tilted his head as he thought of where to find a place fitting for an heir, ignoring her question. The foresweat dropped as his face scrunched up with intense focus. Does it really take that much just to think? Guess I'll have to find a big building. Luffy concluded before scanning the area for one. He thinks important people live in big buildings. Taiyang looked incredulous at the boy's thought process. Is he wrong? Kiro argued, only to receive silence from his male companion. Luffy grinned at the sight of a large building in the distance, believing it to be the place. He prepares himself for the rocket by stretching his arms out in front. Seeing this, Summer scrambled to grab Luffy before he did something stupid. Unfortunately, she got launched with him when she got a hold of him. The three kept their sights on the duo as Summer screamed in fright. They winced when they seen the two crash into the building Luffy targeted. Damn, we get launched into a forest against our will, but he does the launching himself. I'm starting to think he's crazy. Kiro commented, earning nods in agreement. At the crash site, Luffy held onto Summer as he laid in a crater. Good thing he noticed her with him at the time, otherwise she would be in a lot of hurt. Sheesh, if you wanted to come with me, you should have said so. Luffy scolded her. A tick mark grew on her head as she picked herself back up and conked him on the head. I was trying to stop you from doing that. Summer corrected him with sharp teeth. She blinked twice when she felt eyes on the two. The team leader looked over to spot a freaked out man. There wasn't anything special about him, just that he lacked some backbone. One would assume that he's the heir. Sorry for the intrusion. She rubbed her head sheepishly. She picked Luffy up and pushed his head down to apologize with a bow. Are you the important person? Luffy asked with his head still down, causing the man to perk up. If you mean the heir to the chieftain, then yes I am, the man confirmed. Luffy grinned at his lucky guess while Summer started to sweat bullets for crashing into the man's home. Again, we're sorry for causing trouble. I'm one of the huntsmen the town hired. Summer said, earning a nod of understanding. Luffy wrestled himself from her grip and confront the heir. Oi, how long are you going to keep those people waiting? They need you now. Luffy voiced the town's concern. As a leader himself, he knows the responsibility to care for those under your flag. There is no running away from that. Luffy, Summer chided in a hushed tone. Demanding the man to take charge so early wasn't going to help. He still hasn't mourned for the loss of his father. He needs to get over the emotional baggage before he could even think of leading. The heir gripped his head in frustration, feeling the pressure that was thrust upon him. That's all he ever hears lately. People are growing impatient and insecure without a leading figure, but he's nothing like his father. Just give me some time, alright. I know what I'm supposed to do, but I'm not ready yet. I'm not a brave warrior like my dad. Many people assumed that he's an arc even though he shares no relation to them. Compared to him, I'm nothing, he ranted. The two stood quiet as they listened to him. This must be the self-doubt mentioned earlier. Summer thought with a frown, recalling the restaurant owner's words. His self-esteem is so low, he may as well be a beacon for Grimm. And it doesn't help that he's living in his father's shadow. Her eyes widened toward Luffy, wondering if that was his reason for coming here. Their mission was doomed to fail because of the sheer amount of negativity. No matter how many Grimm they slay, dozens will replace them in return. One team can only do so much before numbers overwhelm them. Her teammates caught up to them with Kiro whistling at the hole in the ceiling. Raven narrowed her eyes at the spineless air before turning to leave. She has no clue why they should be concerned for someone that cowers away from duty. So you're just a gutless coward, huh? Well, I don't like you. Luffy proclaimed bluntly before laughing. The air slumped even further at the insult. My thoughts exactly. Raven agreed, adding salt to the wound. So blunt, the others thought. Those two were not making the situation any better. What would you know, anyway? You never had to experience the pressure of expectations like this, the air said in a bitter tone. The five stood in silence as he said that until Luffy spoke up. So that's your excuse. These guys have to protect everyone in this town. It's the same thing, Luffy countered, gesturing to Team STRQ. Summer's team were expected to defend the town from Grimm, and being a pirate captain had its own level of expectations. There's no way that this is any different. I know what it's like to lose someone, but you can't stay like that forever. Luffy softened at his own statement, recalling his brother for the most part. The team never expected to hear that from the cheerful boy. Loss tends to change a person, yet Luffy seems to have gotten over it. Just goes to show that he's more experienced than the heir. Crying won't bring back what we've lost, but look at what you still have. You still have a home with other people in it. Other people who have a dad like you. If you don't do the important stuff, then they'll lose them too. Luffy argued, using what Jinbei told him back then. So you expect me to cheer up and act like it didn't happen? The heir shouted back, I never said that. Your dad staked his life for this town, protecting everyone. He fought with no regrets, so you should feel proud of him and honor that. He didn't give up his life to save the town so you can shut down. Luffy corrected him. Coming from someone who has childish tendencies, they were shocked by the maturity that he's shown right now. Death is a sad thing for sure, but he focuses on how the late chieftain lived his final moments by fighting to his last breath. The heir fell to his hands and knees with tears coming out. He felt so ashamed of how self-centered he is. He's not the only one with a parent. There could be other kids that looked up to their fathers just like him. But, what if I fail? He asked the boy. No, he was staring at a man. He was far more grown up than he looked. Fail? How can you fail if you never tried? Though I guess not trying counts as failing. Luffy scratched his head in contemplation. He held his hand out to the heir in the hopes that he convinced him. Looking up to see the appendage, the heir took his hand and got pulled up to his feet. Luffy chuckled a bit while the heir showed whatever improvement Luffy made with a small smile. Meanwhile, Team STRQ stood in awe of Luffy's words. He managed to get through to the heir, who was stuck in deep depression. Hopefully, this should start suppressing the negativity the town gives off. The doors suddenly opened to reveal a town guard running to the heir. The six turned to him as he stopped to catch his breath. We have trouble, sir. He yelled in alarm. Grimm. Kiro wondered, but the guard shook his head. Remnant's Eternal Pirate by RWBYpiece. No. Bandits are closing in. Our watchtowers spotted them a few minutes ago, and it looks like a raid, the guard panted. Surprise took over them at the news. Just as they made progress on the town's negativity, bandits have to go and ruin it. Things are about to get ugly. Disclaimer: this story do not belong to me. The author is Remnant's Eternal Pirate by RWBYpiece. Chapter 3, The Decision. Team STRQ were running through the streets to reach the entrance to the village with the heir in tow. Luffy, for his part, decided to go with what he believes to be the cool way by rooftop jumping. They probably should have went with that instead of pushing through the crowd as the citizens head to the bunker. The panic brought about from the bandits' arrival wasn't making the Grimm problem any easier. Luffy reached the square before the others, only for his eyes to narrow at the sight before him. Several guards laid on the ground motionless. Luckily they're just unconscious. The bandits must intend for the Grimm to do the dirty work for them, making it look like they were never involved. The bandits themselves prowled around, looking for any loot inside the houses. Some were burning to show they're emptied. They haven't noticed him on the roof yet, but that was going to change very soon. With his haki, he could sense some inside the buildings as they're in the middle of scavenging. He jumped off the roof and landed behind a bandit. The sound of sandals touching cobblestone alerted the bandit, causing him to turn around. He didn't get to say or do anything else as the Straw Hat Boy punched him in the face, sending him past his comrades and crashing into a vendor's stall. What the? The other crooks turned to see Luffy standing with a glare. Looks like someone is trying to be a hero, the presumed leader taunted with the grunts chuckling. He was the only one to stand out above the rest with an eye patch cover his left eye which had a scar running across said eye. The rest had bandanas and were armed with axes and swords. Luffy. Several voices caught the boy's attention. He turned to see Summer's team as they approached, bringing anger to the bandits for being ignored. Whatever guardsmen were left followed behind them. Hey, don't go hogging the action to yourself. Kiro chided the boy. The others were in agreement as they brought out their weapons in preparation. In the back, the heir spotted his downed men in front of the entrance. No. He stared in horror, thinking the worst has happened. Oi, they're not dead. It's not too late, Luffy assured him. The man doesn't know how he could tell at first glance, but he'll just have to trust him. TCH, so we have huntsmen to deal with too. The bandit leader put his fingers to his lips before whistling. The rest of his men showed themselves at the signal, causing the heir to grimace. There are too many of them. By the time they deal with the bandits, the Grim would be right at their doorstep. His eyes widened at the position that the unconscious guards are in, realizing they'll be the first thing the beasts see. Men, we need to pull our wounded away from here. We can always rebuild, but lives aren't so easily replaced. He ordered the men behind him, earning approving nods from them. Who says that we'll let you? The bandit leader said with a cocky smirk. We did, Cyclops. Luffy answered while picking his nose, angering the man with the nickname. Team STRQ sweat dropped at his casual response. The heir decided to take initiative and ran to the one of his unconscious men before lifting them up by his arms. A shadow loomed over him, prompting him to look up to see a bandit with an axe bringing it down on him. Kiro stepped in and easily blocked it with his sword. Get going already, Kiro said, breaking the man out of his stupor. The bandit gritted his teeth at the interference before Kiro pushed him back and cut him down. The sight of their comrade being taken out brought out a battle cry from the rest as they charged in. The guards engaged along with the huntsmen, giving a small batch of soldiers time to pull the wounded out of the battlefield. Raven got to work by using swift slashes to reduce their numbers one by one. She smirked when she saw Taiyang closing in behind her with a goon on his tail. She ducked when he leapt over her with a flying kick, hitting the grunt attacking the woman. Raven returned the favor by cutting down the blonde's pursuer, who was caught off guard by the maneuver. What a gentleman, Raven commented with an eye roll, realizing he could have slid under and get a peep under her dress. Taiyang chuckled sheepishly at her observation before getting back to knocking the bandits, lights out. On Summer's end, she launched her chains at a cluster of goons and bound them together. Luffy comes up to her and grabs onto them with a mischievous grin. The duo managed to lift them off the ground and started spinning in circles. What are those two doing? Gah, one of the grunts comically shouted before getting slammed by the ball of people they're swinging. Their own team almost got hit as well. Hey, watch where you're swinging that thing. Taiyang berated them with sharp teeth. Sorry. Summer apologized. Luffy ignored him as he focused on laughing his ass off. Too bad Summer disconnected the chains of aura, launching the bandits out of town with the momentum. Ha ha ha, bye bye guys. Luffy cheered at the thrown bandits with swirly eyes. His body was wobbling from side to side, feeling dizzy from the stunt. The leader now known as Cyclops gritted his teeth at being humiliated by the kid before catching sight of the heir carrying one of the guards to safety. Grinning at the idea in his head, he pulled a bazooka from his back and pointed it at the heir. Luffy shook off the dizziness and paled at the man's intention. Oi, get out of there, Luffy yelled. Huh, the heir looked over to him and froze when he saw the launcher aimed at him. Team STRQ were too far to help him and Luffy was obscured by a horde of grunts. With the pull of the trigger, the rocket was let loose on a course towards the heir. His eyes were wide with fright as he stared at the projectile. A resounding clap was heard by everyone, but went ignored as the rocket made contact with its target. Cyclops' grin widened at the successful hit while the huntsman and pirate gaped in horror. When the smoke cleared, everyone adopted looks of shock at the sight of a stone wall standing between the heir and the rocket. That was too close for comfort. Are you all right, young man? A familiar voice asked. The heir opened his eyes from when he braced for the lethal blow. The old bartender had his hand on the ground with static trailing to the stone wall. The heir nodded dumbly at the old man, still trying to wrap his head around what happened. The restaurant owner smiled before turning his attention to the Straw Hat Boy. Don't worry about our rescue operation, just deal with those in front of you, the bartender assured. With these weak grunts, he would have figured that Luffy was going to take them out in an instant. Perhaps he wants to leave some for the team of huntsmen. The former pirate king was in disbelieving shock of who the chef is. He recalled a person he befriended from long ago with the very same semblance. Ed, Luffy guessed, earning a sigh from the bartender. All it took was his semblance for Luffy to recognize him. He has changed a lot with age, yet Luffy shows no signs of aging. Looks like his theory might be right after all, for better or for worse. Wait, you actually met this guy before? Summer wondered in disbelief. Luffy nodded at the question before getting back to the group of grunts, who were still dumbstruck with the old man's interference. Ed took off his gloves and rolled up his sleeves to show metal gauntlets underneath with fire dust stored in them. Clapping his hands once more, he placed them on the ground to form a row of cannons out of the stone. The dust in his gauntlets were infused to the cannons as a type of gunpowder. The bandits tried to flee from its sights, but was too late as the cannons fired upon them. The explosions blew many of them away, stunning Team STRQ with the display. Ed can only chuckle at their expressions. "Hey, stop staring at the awesome cannons and fight," Luffy shouted with sharp teeth. The team grew tick marks at his bossy attitude, noticing that he's not faring any better with his starry eyes. "Like you're one to talk," they shouted back. They entered the fray with renewed vigor, this time with Ed's support through cannonballs. Cyclops growled through the conversation, feeling toyed with and not taken seriously. He switches over to Raven and fires another rocket. The woman stared on in disinterest before cutting the rocket with a quick swing of her sword. The two halves whizzed by her, leaving the spectators in awe. "So cool," Luffy exclaimed with starry eyes. He couldn't help but wonder if she could entertain Zoro with skill like that. Seeing that rockets aren't doing anything, the one-eyed bandit threw away the weapon in favor of the sword strapped to his side. Luffy's eyes were half-lidded at the boring weapon. He's met plenty of people who integrated a gun into the weapon design, and seeing the plain sword is just underwhelming. "TCH, what's your problem?" the man wondered as he spotted the boy. Luffy gives no response as he sees how the team is doing. Kiro doesn't stop with his sword swings, forcing the grunts away from his reach. He decides to punish them by changing his weapon into its gun form and shoot the distant opponents. Luffy had stars in his eyes at the new form. "Does your weapon do that, Cyclops?" Luffy asked when he returned to normal, judging the sword that the bandit wields. "That's what bothers you," the man comically shouted. Growing irritated with the boy, he extended the handle to form a naginata. He lunged at Luffy with a swing of his polearm, but it doesn't even scare him in the slightest. Luffy blurred out of sight before it touched him, shocking his foe with his speed. I guess it's a little cool if it grows longer." Luffy altered his opinion a bit, still not impressed. The leader turned with wide eyes at the Straw Hat Boy standing on the blade. "Stop mocking me," he seethed. Luffy hopped off the naginata before its wielder flew into a rage. No matter how many swings and thrusts he threw, Luffy easily dodged them by inches. "Hold still, you bastard," he roared in anger, earning everyone's attention. His men were demoralized at the sight of their boss fight what seems to be a losing battle. They just don't see themselves winning if a mere boy can toy with him. "Okay Luffy, we get it. You can dodge everything he throws at you. Now would you stop playing around and put him out of his misery?" Tai Yang groaned. It hurts to watch a guy try so hard only to have no luck in hitting Luffy. The bandit leader has lost all composure, along with any chance of victory. He's not sure if Luffy heard him or not as he continued to backpedal and avoid the naginata. His back bumped into a wall, leaving no more room to maneuver. "Now I got ya," the leader yelled in menacing glee before he aimed his next attack at Luffy's neck. Taking down the last grunt, Summer was revealed the sight of her new friend fixing to be beheaded. "Luffy," she cried out in worry. To her confusion, Luffy wore a confident grin. "Buso, Coca armament, hardening." His arm turned to a shiny black color as he raised it to block the blade. The blade shattered upon impact, turning the huntsman's eyes into dinner plates at the unlikely turn of events. They don't recall anything about a human limb breaking metal, but it might have something to do with the black coating on his arm. The bandit exchanged his rage for despair at the loss of his weapon. The metallic look faded from Luffy's arm before he punched him in the gut. The man coughed saliva and rolled his eyes back as he fell to the floor in a heap. "Phew, holding back my strength is really annoying, but I have no choice," Luffy complained. Over the course of time, humanity has grown really flimsy compared to those of his era. If he's not careful, he may end up killing someone on accident by using his full strength. Although he'll still crush the spirits of the evildoers as a form of punishment. Better that than let them off easy through death. Grim, on the other hand, will receive no such treatment. Summer lets out a sigh of relief. Why was she so worried? Luffy has already proven himself to be incredibly strong, so it should have been expected. Granted, she didn't think the naginata could break like that. The coast was clear of bandits with a few guards left to drag away from the entrance. That's one part out of the way. Kiro muttered, dreading the wave of Grim. Ed lets out a hum in acknowledgement before walking towards the gate. Seeing that it was thoroughly destroyed, Ed clapped his hands before planting them to the ground to erect another stone wall and close the entrance. This should hold up the Grim for a bit and give them brief respite and time to pull the vulnerable guards away. Tai Yang was busy whistling a tune as he was rounding up the unconscious bandits with rope for the guards to take to prison. It'll be a tight fit, but at least they'll no longer cause trouble. The bandits thrown out by Luffy and Summer won't plan on anything without their leader, so that's out of the way. I was wondering why you had a sharp intuition with Grim. Kiro mused behind him. I may have retired my life as a huntsman, but old habits die hard. Between my job, family, and exercise, my schedule is pretty packed. But that's no excuse to defend my home. Ed said. So this is your semblance? Summer inquired with a curious gaze towards the wall Ed created. Yeah, my semblance is alchemy. I create whatever I desire as long as I have the materials, but larger structures take more aura. Ed explained. The details of his semblance left the two in amazement of its versatility. However, one must know what their creation is made of in the first place. It's definitely a semblance that suits intellectuals. That's pretty neat and all, but what's your history with Luffy? Why didn't you tell him who you were? Taiyang cuts in while dusting his hands off. Ed contemplated on how to answer his questions. He doesn't want to say too much and bring suspicion to Luffy. To put it simply, he saved my life. We spent some time together before going our separate ways. During that time, I seemed to have changed enough to where Luffy didn't recognize me. But I was okay with that because he's doing well for himself. That's all I could hope for from my savior, Ed said, giving part of the truth. A small frown adorned his face at the last bit. If his theory was right, then Luffy has been hurting more than he ever knew. There's no one that can fully understand the deep wound in Luffy. The three accepted his short story, but still felt like he was hiding something. If that's all he is willing to tell, then they won't pry further. The trio along with Raven soon fixed their gazes on Luffy. Why are you guys looking at me like that? Luffy asked, not liking the sharp looks given to him. Don't play coy with us, Luffy. How did you break that? Raven cuts to the chase as she gestures to the broken Naginata. Her teammates demanded an answer too. He has no aura or armor on his body. Yet he has proven to not only block it without harming himself, but also destroy the offending weapon. Luffy gives no verbal response, opting to show them Busoshoku Haki by repeating what he did recently. There will be a time later where he can give a proper explanation. The shift in skin tone startled them, but piqued their interest nonetheless. Curious eyes scanned the arm, causing Luffy to sweat drop at their ogling. A mischievous grin came to him at the thought of a demonstration. Nay, Tai. Luffy brought the brawler's attention. You wanna punch it? He asked. Sure. He shrugged in indifference. The others were confused as to what Luffy wanted to show to them. Luffy held his blackened fist out as a target while Taiyang lowered himself into a stance. He poured every bit of strength into his punch and smashed it against Luffy's. The wind blew over the silence that was present for a few seconds as nothing happened. Taiyang puts on the best poker face he can muster as he slowly pulled his fist back. His hand throbbed in pain and he tried to hide it. He fell to his knees and clutched his hurting hand, shocking his friends. How hard is that black coating? Taiyang, are you alright? Did you break a knuckle? Raven asked in concern. Never better. My arm is all tingly, but I'm fine. Taiyang said through clenched teeth, trying to act tough in front of the woman. He doesn't know how to describe the hardness of the black coating. The closest he could come up with is either a car or a building. Damn, no wonder that thing broke. Kiro commented. I can also hit a lot harder with it. Luffy added, giving them the shivers. As if he doesn't hit like a train as it is. Please don't use it on us. Summer squeaked in fear of its might. Luffy had a deep pout at that. I'm not that stupid. It's hard enough to keep someone alive without it. Luffy argued. He felt offended by her statement. He would never dream of hurting any friends. While it was nice to hear that Luffy has no intention to kill, she didn't mean any harm behind it. Smooth, Summer. Kiro deadpanned, causing her to flinch. I meant it as a joke. A joke that's clearly not funny to you. Summer defended in an attempt to recover from her blunder. Their conversation was interrupted by a deep growl emanating from the temporary gate. The stone cracked under pressure and more growls were heard on the other side. Looks like the Grim finally made it. Ed pointed out the obvious. The heir returned with any able-bodied guard with him. He grew tense when he heard another thump on the stone wall holding them back. What do we do, sir? One of the men asked. The heir racked his brain for any strategies until a proverbial light bulb lit up. We'll use the gate as a choke point. There may be many, but they have no choice but to come through here. Archers, train your sights on the gate. The heir ordered. Luffy chuckled at the man's initiative. Guy is starting to act like a chieftain now. A solid plan, to be sure. But don't count us out yet, Ed said. He gathered several of the swords the bandits left and brought them to the broken Naginata. With a quick use of his semblance, he repaired the weapon and handed it to the heir. He fumbled around with until he got a firm grip on it. He audibly gulped, feeling nervous about fighting. But he sets that aside for the sake of his men. The town needs to know that they can rest easy. What better way to prove that than fighting on the front line? Ed used alchemy to form another row of cannons aimed at the gate, which is on the verge of breaking. Feels like old times, Luffy. Ed said, earning a chuckle from the boy. Team STRQ stood by their side with their weapons drawn. Yosh, if any strong ones come in, then Summer and the others could deal with it. Luffy assured, placing some faith in the team. Said team grinned at the indirect praise. They waited for the stone wall to collapse with bated breath. As soon as it falls, all hell will break loose. The stone finally gave way with brute force, causing debris to fly out. When Beowulfs and Ursa made their appearance through the smoke, the cannons fired upon them and wiped a lot of them out. The archers let loose their arrows soon after, aiming for any stragglers that survived. Alright, one of the guards cheered prematurely. If only it was that easy. Summer commented, tightening her grip on her weapons. She proved right when the ground shook beneath their feet. A huge figure entered the fray as the guards stopped themselves from charging. It revealed itself to be a chubby Grim with a huge belly. Bone armor was spotted on its shoulders, knuckles, and shins. A pair of teeth protruded from the bottom lip. "Oh boy, that's an ogre." Kiro groaned. As if it heard its own name, the ogre roared at the humans. While the sound sent a chill down the guard's spine, Luffy pinched his nose shut from the stench. "Blech, his breath smells like fart," Luffy said in disgust. "You're telling me, if that thing breathed on us, we would be taking a very long bath." Tai Yang added, "Now's not the time to complain about the smell." Raven berated the two. Their banter was interrupted by a shadow that loomed over them. Turning their attention to the sky, they spotted a large Nevermore as it perched itself on the town's wall. The sight of the two Grim together has everyone on edge. One is a fleshy tank while the other rains death from above. "Whoa, that bird is huge." The pirate stared in awe of the Nevermore's size. "Is there anything that intimidates you?" Summer wondered. Even with their experience with Grim, her team still has the sense to be wary of the ones that have grown. Luffy doesn't look afraid in the slightest, seeing them as nothing more than enemies to fight. The heir analyzed the scene before him, running through many scenarios as if it was a chess game. The ogre may be the most threatening on the field, but the Nevermore is untouchable with its air superiority, he concluded. The others agree with his observation. They can at least attack the ogre since it's on the ground, but they're not equipped to combat flying opponents. The Nevermore took off from its perch and was about to flap its wings to let loose some razor-sharp feathers. Everyone except Ed braced themselves until stretchy arms reached out and grabbed them. Gomu Gomu no rocket. Luffy reeled himself in and rammed his head against the belly of the giant bird, sending it back before it regained its bearings. It caught in anger at the human that interfered. The guards gaped at the sight of Luffy's stretchy limbs as the rubber man landed on the wall. "Shishishi. I'm going to be your opponent, so don't think I'll let you attack them," Luffy declared, his gaze fixed on the Nevermore. "Let Luffy handle that alone. The ogre is ours," Summer said. Her team has already witnessed the raven-haired boy deal with Grim on his own. They can at least have faith that Luffy can pull through again. Ed nodded at that before clapping his hands and creating a blade coming out of the gauntlet's wrist. "That leaves us with the cannon fodder. Get ready, young man," Ed warned the heir. Beowulfs started to pour in through the gate, leading to a battle cry from the guards. The battle soon became a war zone as everyone fought the oncoming horde. Despite his old age, Ed was sidestepping many of the attacks targeting him. The offenders don't get the chance to continue as he decapitates them as soon as they miss. He uses his alchemy semblance to create an array of spikes from the ground, impaling several Beowulfs in one go. The heir was holding his own along with his men. He keeps his distance as he either cuts into the jugular or stabs them in the heart with the naginata. For someone who was spineless earlier, he can handle himself in a fight. The ogre charged towards Team STRQ with slow, heavy steps. Both humans and Grim gave a wide berth in fear of being stepped on. The four scattered when the fat Grim swung its arm across the ground. Kiro moved behind it and unloaded some bullets into its back, annoying the beast. It tried to fall on its back in an effort to crush him, but Kiro dived to the side. Tai Yang rushed in next. The ogre got back up and cupped its hands to smash him into the ground. The blonde brawler jumped to avoid it and run along its arm to get up close. He reached its face and threw a punch hard enough to make the ogre's head reel back. The ogre flung its belly up to hit him in return, sending Tai crashing into a building. The three stared incredulously at the counter. Did it just use that big belly as a weapon? Tai Yang's disbelieving voice rang out of the house. The ogre turned to one of the lampposts in interest. It grabbed the base with both hands and ripped it off the ground. The ogre tested it with a few practice swings before looking over to the three as Tai Yang climbed out of the house. "Gotta give it points for ingenuity," Kiro joked. Those points seemed to only rise as it picked up an Ursa off to the side and hurled it at them. Raven steps in and bisects it with the Ido. When her three teammates went back into the fray, Summer noticed the absence of Luffy and the Nevermore. Where did Luffy go? She wondered to herself. He went outside of town with his pet bird. Ed spoke up beside her. Summer had a thoughtful look before concluding that it may be for the best. Whether Luffy knew it or not, he's minimalizing the damage to the town by keeping the flying Grim far away from it. She breaks out of her thoughts in favor of joining her team against the ogre. Speaking of the pirate, his eyes were locked onto the Nevermore as he ran through the forest. The large bird caught before raining down more feathers, but Luffy evaded them. Seeing his chance, Luffy jumped really high in the air and cocked his fist back at the peak of his jump. Gomu Gomu no pistol. He stretched his arm out towards his foe. Luffy frowned when the Nevermore barreled out of the way, his fist missing. Gomu Gomu no stamp. This time he stretched out his foot, but it flew higher and out of reach of his limbs. Gravity took him back down to the ground. Luffy lets out an annoyed huff as the Nevermore kept itself out of range. "Guess I have no choice but to do that now, huh," he muttered. Luffy got into a crouch before springing himself high in the air, still out of reach. Skywalk. He started to kick the air as if they're stepping stones and ascend to new heights. The Nevermore started to look bigger as he got closer to it. Painfully aware that he's going to be alone at some point, Luffy had to figure out his form of transportation since he can't sail with the Sunny by himself. Nami won't be around to guide them and Frankie won't be able to repair the ship once he's gone. He already touched the concept of both Soru and Geppo, or Skywalk as Sanji calls it, with his gears. Might as well finish learning the techniques without having to use second or fourth gear so he can cross the ocean whenever he wants. He doesn't have any need to learn the rest of the Rokushiki since he's strong enough as it is. Although he'll still take the scenic route on the ground and find some enjoyment in the scenery whenever he's inland. The Nevermore spotted him as he approached. It launched another volley of feathers at him, only for him to slip past them with Skywalk. Luffy stretched his arms out and grabbed the bird's wing before pulling himself over it. He rode on top of its back and wrapped both arms around the wings and yanked them back, causing the two to plummet. Woohoo! Luffy cheered as he had a firm grip on the appendages that allowed the bird to fly. The Nevermore doesn't share his excitement with its frantic kind. The forest below closed in too fast for the two as the Grim slammed belly first into the ground, kicking up a lot of dust. The Nevermore writhed in agony from the fall as Luffy grinned. He stretched his leg up high in the sky, ready to finish it off. Gomu Gomu no Ono axe. His leg shot straight down and stomped on the giant bird, earning several crunks when the force broke its bones. One dying caw later, it fell limp and started to evaporate. Hopping off the corpse, Luffy looked over his handiwork. Yosh, that's one annoying Grim down. I wonder how Summer and the others are doing. Luffy tilted his head in thought. He shrugs his shoulders before he used Haki to find his way back to town. He launched himself over with a rocket and landed on top of a roof overlooking the battle. He chuckled to himself when he sees the small fry dwindling in number thanks to Ed in the air. An explosion of dust caught his attention, believing that might be Summer's team. He went to check it out and soon saw that they're having a hard time. With the extended reach of the lamppost, the ogre keeps swinging it close to the ground like a golf club. Growing annoyed at the makeshift weapon, Raven sheathed her odachi and prepared herself for a quick draw. The lamppost was about a meter away from her when she struck it, cutting through it like a hot knife through butter. The severed lamppost flew past her and buried into the ground. Nice. Now we can. Raven. Hey Raven. Tai Yang called out to the black-haired woman, only for it to fall on deaf ears as she charged in alone. The ogre growled at the woman as it threw away the broken weapon and tore bricks off of a nearby house. It threw them in a shotgun spread, forcing the woman to cut her way out of the hail of bricks. She was too occupied with the projectiles to notice the ogre backhanding her, sending her crashing into a wall. Air left her lungs in a gasp as she fell to her knees. Raven, her team cried out. Summer ran towards the ogre before it tried to do anything else. She cross-slashed the heel, eliciting a roar from the ogre as it dropped to one knee. Seeing the chance to escape, Raven created a portal next to her and jumped in. Another portal appeared next to Tai and Kiro with Raven popping out. Luffy exclaimed in shock. What she just did almost reminded him of Blueno's door fruit, except she didn't open a door in the air itself. What the hell was that about? Were you trying to get killed? Kiro scolded his sister. Raven only narrowed her eyes and turned away from them. Tai Yang sighs at her stubbornness. Look, I get it. Luffy showed us up back there, single-handedly taking on Grim with nothing more than his fists. But charging in just to prove that you can do the same will be the end of you. And I know you wouldn't want your life to end because of some rookie mistake. Tai told her his piece. It was fine to prove your strength, but letting it get the better of you can cloud your judgment and backfire. He could tell that she listened from her soft expression, contemplating on his words. Fine, I'm sorry for being reckless. Happy, Raven muttered. Tai Yang snorted at how quiet her apology was, earning a sharp look from her. She really doesn't like admitting her faults. If you guys are finished, can you help me? Summer asked as she delivered small cuts on the ogre while staying clear of its arms and belly. She jumped back when the ogre cupped its hands and brought it down on her, kicking up dust with the impact. Right, let's start with the arms. Kiro suggested, earning nods of agreement. The gears in the sword's cross guard began to spin. The blade broke into segments before curving into a crescent blade while the handle extended in length. He gave his now revealed scythe a few twirls before resting it on his shoulders with a wry grin. Awesome, Luffy shouted at the top of his lungs. The rest of Team STRQ gave their teammate a half-lidded stare as Kiro basked in the praise of his weapon. Show off. They deadpanned in their thoughts. Glad you like it, kid. Weren't you fighting the Nevermore earlier? Kiro wondered with a quirked brow. Oh, the big bird. It's already dead. Luffy cheered with a fist pump, not bothering to remember the Grimm's name. The four were shocked at how quick the fight was, especially when a brawler was pitted against a flying opponent. Geez, now we really need to finish up here. But as a team this time. Tai Yang emphasized his point by giving Raven an accusative stare. I know. Raven waved it off. With that, the four charged in as one unit while the ogre decided to do the same with its three working limbs, its bulbous belly dragging across the ground. Tai, Summer called out. The blonde read her intentions and held his arm out for her to stand on. When she got into position, Tai Yang swung his arm in a wide arc to launch her at great speed. A string of chains trailed behind her as she got closer. The ogre swung its arm to grab her, but she barreled over it and caught its neck with the chains. The ogre grunted at the pressure on its windpipe as Summer reeled herself to the back of the head. Her swords shifted to sickles before she hooked them into the ogre's eyes, blinding it. It howled in pain and thrashed about until it grabbed her and threw her off. Fusant balloon. Summer braced herself for environmental impact before she felt herself sinking into something soft. Bouncing off of it, she turned to see Luffy inflated to the size of a large beach ball. "Thanks, again," Summer said, realizing it wasn't the first time he helped her. Kiro took point next and leapt at the blind ogre. The Grim let out a screech as the scythe carved through its shoulder, leaving it with 2 limbs. Taiyang runs under its head and delivers an uppercut, sending the head reeling back towards the sky. If it could see, then it would have noticed Raven's figure above, holding her sword down. Before it could fall back down, Raven fell and plunged her blade straight in between the eyes. The ogre was still persistent as it twitched violently, reaching to the front of its face to crush the fly. "Just die already," Raven yelled through clenched teeth as she forced the blade further into its skull, stopping all movement. The arm fell limp a few feet away from her as the ogre finally perished. Everyone stared at the corpse as it evaporated while Raven pulled out her sword and hopped off. "We did it," one of the guards cheered, earning shouts of joy from his comrades. The air fell on his butt and panted in exhaustion. Ed returned the arm blade to normal as he lets out a calm breath. While the fight was over, he still had something to do. He needed to speak with Luffy in private regarding his current lifestyle. Now that the boy recognizes him, he can't leave things in good conscience. Luffy will be reminded of the horrors of his curse. This might be the only chance he has to help his savior before he breaks any further. Said boy joined the team in celebration. "Ha ha ha, nice going everyone." He congratulated them and gave Raven a hard pat on the back. Stinging pain came to her when he hit the same spot that she slammed the building with. "God damn it, you dumbass. That hurt like hell." Raven at him before getting into a dust brawl with him. "Aw, I'm sorry." Luffy cried out in panic as he got pummeled, earning sweat drops. "If anything, we should be thanking you, Luffy. You took out the Nevermore on your own, in record time no less." Summer humbled herself. "Speaking of, how did you do it?" Taiyang inquired. There was no feasible way Luffy could jump high enough and punch the Nevermore, all while avoiding the sharp feathers. "I used Skywalk." Luffy's simple answer did not sat their curiosity in the least. Before they argued at the vague reply, Luffy jumped up and kicked the air to keep himself off the ground. Their jaws dropped at the technique that defies all logic. Since when was it a thing to literally walk on air? The demonstration speaks for itself. No wonder how he killed the Grim so easily now. "I believe this ends your mission, I'm afraid." Ed spoke up, gaining their attention. "What do you mean?" Taiyang asked. The young man has discovered his own reason to fight for his citizens as well as the courage to face the hardships ahead. "I find it adequate enough for him to assume his position as chieftain," Ed pointed out, casting a glance at the air surrounded by his jovial men. Not only have they won against high-level Grim and reduced their numbers, their new chieftain has found the will to stand up for the people he leads. "Don't you think it's too soon to leave though?" Summer asked in concern. Luffy perked up at the thought of leaving. "Huh, no way. We need a feast to celebrate first," Luffy said, not taking no for an answer. "You're just saying that so you can eat." The 4 shouted at him. Ed gave a soft chuckle at his priorities. "I don't see why not. Think of it as a coronation of sorts for our new chieftain." Ed thought of an excuse for their party. "Make sure you bring plenty of drinks," Kiro said, taking advantage of the party. Raven smacked the back of his head in annoyance of his alcoholic tendencies. "See, come on, you don't have to do all that." The air voiced his thoughts, but Luffy wasn't having it. "Idiot, this is a time when a boy becomes a man," Luffy argued. "Hell yeah, how can we not party for something like that?" Taiyang put in his 2 cents. "Luffy really wants that party, huh?" Summer sweat dropped. Raven pinches the bridge of her nose, frustrated with the trio. After a minute of convincing the air, he finally relents to the request. The party proceeded as intended when the town square was filled with singing, laughter, and much to Luffy's joy, food. Ed has been working around the clock as he cooked food and rebuilt the houses with alchemy, much to everyone's chagrin. He's here to celebrate, not to work. The old man simply shrugged and told them that people need a roof to sleep under once night comes. They groaned at the workaholic's insistence. Kiro was having a field day with the booze while Taiyang shared some puns with the audience, much to his team's horror. They did get a laugh when he was bombarded by tomatoes. Raven mainly kept to herself away from the crowd as she's not much of a social person. Summer, having a soft spot for children, kept tabs on them with their parents. Time flew by in the blink of an eye. Before they knew it, it was nighttime as everyone turned in for the day. Tomorrow, Team STRQ would be heading back to Beacon Academy to report on their mission. "We should party like this more often," Kiro brought up with a slur in his voice, earning eye twitches from Tai and Raven who are carrying his drunken body. "We hope to see a day that he'll be sober for once in our lives." Tai muttered. Summer lets out a tired yawn as the two complain about Kiro's drinking problem. Thinking about their departure, it came to her that Luffy and the team would have to go their separate ways. It was quite the learning experience for the four as they're introduced to a person that can't have an aura but has powers from a devil fruit. She could only hope that they'll meet again later, just like Ed. Luffy, speaking of which, Ed caught up to them and called for the young man. Everyone turned to give the old man his undivided attention. Can we talk? It's been a while since we saw each other, after all. Ed formed an excuse. While he does have something else to talk about, they could always catch up. Okay. Luffy answered. He gave the four huntsmen a grin before he left with Ed. Team STRQ only shrugged at each other, seeing nothing wrong before heading for the inn. The two walked around town until they reached a small park devoid of people. The perfect place for their private conversation. It really has been a long time, huh? But you're still pretty strong even though you. Luffy, stop beating around the bush. I have a good idea as to what you are. Ed cuts the boy off. Luffy wears a solemn frown at the statement. Ed's not stupid enough to not notice his unchanging appearance. I may not know the specifics, but I'm going to assume that you're immortal. Am I right? Ed demanded confirmation. Luffy remained silent, but it only proves that he was correct. It was the only thing that made sense. How he looks so young despite the time that passed, how he has knowledge about things that Remnant doesn't know about, and the amount of combat experience the boy possesses. Ever since he saw Luffy again, he ran through the scenario over and over again in his head. There was no other explanation. The old man kept thinking that the boy was doing all right, but he was so naive to believe that. If it hadn't been for his reunion, he would have never realized how much Luffy was hurting. He can no longer remain ignorant of Luffy's pain now that he knows. It's not like I can't ever die. I just don't grow old like you. Luffy finally admitted. It was no use dodging it now. The pirate never felt the need to tell others because they'll eventually take that secret to the grave. Doesn't change the fact that there have been a few that learned of it but they're alive no longer. I see, Ed mused. So death is possible, but he's in a whole different league compared to the people at present. Contemplating his next words, he thinks of the one question that would poke anyone's mind. If you mind me asking, how old are you? Or better yet, were there any Grimm when you were born? Ed specified his inquiry. Research into aura and dust took place after the Grimm's arrival, yet there was no mention of devil fruits or hockey. This brings the possibility that Luffy's era was never plagued by Grimm. I forgot how old I am, but there weren't any Grimm until after I became the Pirate King. Luffy replied. His body starts to shudder as tears welled up in his eyes. So we're talking about something further beyond what we presume to be the beginning. I guess during that time, your history faded and was replaced by our own. Ed concluded. His expression softened as Luffy struggled to hold it together. It sucks to be alone. I can make as many friends as I want, but then I'll be alone again when they die from age. I don't even know how much longer you have left. Luffy choked up. This was exactly what Ed was afraid of. Luffy's will to live has become a double-edged sword now. The longer he lives, the more he breaks. Then what kept you going? Despite all of the pain you've endured, there was something that made it worth it in the end. Ed wondered. Luffy stared down at his hands as he tried to calm himself. A friend traded his life for this, even though I didn't want it. I hated what he did to me, but somehow I think he had a huge plan that I don't know about. He trusts me with this, so I'll keep living to make sure his faith isn't misplaced. Luffy declared. You mean to say that you accepted it for this long for the sake of a person's faith? How can you be so sure that what you're doing is according to his plan when you don't have a clue as to what it is? Ed stared incredulously at the eternal pirate. Because I believe in him. Luffy answered as if it was the most obvious thing, shocking the old man. It should have been obvious to him too. Luffy is the kind of person to place blind and unwavering faith in his friends. He still believes in the very person that sent him into eternal suffering, thinking that there was a reason. The amount of loyalty Luffy has is through the roof. Even so, you'll need some other reason to live once you think you succeeded in his plan. I know it's selfish to ask, but you will break before that happens at this rate. Man has their limits, and you're no exception. How much more of this can you stand? How much longer will it take before this plan comes to fruition? Ed questioned him further. Judging by Luffy's expression, he hasn't thought that far. He's been wandering aimlessly in the hopes that a part of the plan his friend devised will come to him. He's hanging on a very thin thread that's bound to snap. After that, what will save him from falling into the abyss? There's nothing exciting left to do though. Luffy whined. No doubt because of your long life. Ed deadpanned. He racked his brain for a way for Luffy to keep moving. He was able to get to this point in life because Luffy saved him. That's it. A proverbial light bulb lit up above Ed's head. Luffy, would you hear out an old man's request? Ed pleaded, gaining the pirate's attention. You may not find any more fulfillment for yourself, but what about fulfilling someone else's life? Ed proposed. You want me to spend my time with someone until they die? Luffy didn't like the sound of it much. Stop thinking about their death, Luffy. You know as well as I do that it's inevitable. It's how they spend it that matters. But you can make sure that they live their lives without regret. Find the will to live for someone else. Ed held the boy by his shoulders as he tried to convince him. Quote. You seem to not realize just how much you affected a person's life. You saved mine. Had you not done that, I wouldn't have a family to call my own. I started my own restaurant, have grandchildren waiting for me, and a home worth risking my life over. In truth, I opened the restaurant for the possible chance of seeing you again, to give you my thanks for making this a reality. Ed said. Luffy was bewildered by how much his one action did for the old man. It made him wonder if it happened with other people he met before now. Like how I traveled with that sneeze guy. Luffy mentioned. Question marks appeared around Ed at that. Do you mean Nicholas Schnee? Ed wondered. Yeah, that's right. He beamed. Ed gaped at him as he flew back a bit with his eyes bugged out. What's wrong? Luffy was oblivious to the meaning behind his own words. Oh boy, he has no clue what he actually started. Ed rubbed his forehead at the news. He recovered his composure and cleared his throat before continuing. Yes. Like that, the old man said with a sheepish look. Luffy's eyes were covered by his hat as he was in deep contemplation. His adventures until now have been very dull, with the exception of a scarce few. The joys of life have stretched thin by now. Maybe he can discover a new form of adventure if he gives someone a lifetime's worth of adventure. Ed wore a small smile at the boy's internal debate. Even if he doesn't heed to it in the end, at least he can rest easy knowing he tried to help his savior. You don't have to give an answer right away. Take some time to think about it. Ed finished before leaving Luffy to his thoughts. The Straw Hat Boy decided to return to the inn to sleep on it shortly after. When morning arrived, Summer and her team packed up before leaving. Kiro fussed about his hangover, only to be told that he reaps what he sows. Surprisingly enough, they didn't see Luffy when they woke up. The walk to the town gate was filled with citizens that gave their gratitude to the huntsman. The heir was waiting for them at the entrance along with Ed. I guess you have to go back to your academy, huh? A shame you couldn't stay longer, the heir said. Yeah, I only wish we could have said goodbye to Luffy. He really contributed to the town's defense. Summer said solemnly. I know what you mean. He was the one that got me on my feet. After all, he shared her sentiments. Have you seen him this morning? Kiro asked the old man. I'm afraid not. He goes wherever the wind takes him. You might meet him again if fortune favors it. Ed shook his head, but kept a bit of optimism. He fishes out an empty flask and tosses to Kiro. He quirks a brow at the flask after he catches it. A souvenir from me. You're responsible for your own liquor, though. Ed said, earning a grin from the drunk. I'll be sure to take a swig every anniversary. Kiro joked as he puts away the gift. Don't encourage him to drink more. His teammates shouted at the retired huntsman with sharp teeth. Anyway, thanks again for your service. The heir cuts in. Oh stop. We're just doing what any good person would do. Summer humbles herself with a bashful look, earning eye rolls. They were about to resume leaving town until another voice made itself known. Oh why? The voice shouted. Feeling a sense of déjà vu, the group stepped aside as a figure flew in between them and crashed into the ground. Luffy hopped up to his feet and pouted at the four for dodging his hug. Nice for you to drop by. Taiyang punned, earning his usual groans. Since we're about to part ways, I just want to say thank you for helping us. Summer said in a grateful tone. Luffy crossed his arms and aimed his childish pout at her. Why are you saying it like we're saying goodbye? He inquired, confusing Team STRQ. Ed perked up with a hopeful look. Because we are. You're traveling somewhere while we have to get back to Beacon. Raven told him. Luffy's pout never left him as he walks up to Summer and flicks her on the forehead. Ow, what was that for? Summer demanded. I'm coming with you guys. Luffy said with no room for argument. A few silent seconds followed as the team processed this. What? They shouted. Did you guys not hear me? I'm coming with you. Luffy said in annoyance as he picked his ear. We heard you the first time, you idiot. First of all, you can't just waltz into Beacon. Secondly, why do you want to come along? Raven demanded. Too bad, I'll do whatever I want. I like you guys and you're pretty funny. Luffy reasoned. So you're going on a whim. Taiyang yelled in disbelief. I'm sorry, Luffy. We can't bring strangers to our school. Summer argued a point. Sure, he was fun to be around, but he's not even a student in any of the Huntsman academies. They won't allow a person without any records on their grounds. Well, I refuse their refusal. Luffy poorly countered. That doesn't make any sense. Summer ruffled her hair in frustration of the stubborn boy. Come on, guys. If anything, he did as much work as we did. At the very least, the school can see him as a guest. Kiro argued in support of Luffy. Knowing that the side wielder had a point, the rest groaned and gave in. Luffy cheered in excitement when they came to an agreement. They called in a bullhead to take them to Beacon while mentioning an extra passenger. As they left town, Ed stood by and watched them with a smile. I'm glad that you came to a decision, Luffy. I can only hope that Summer and her team can heal your pain, if only a little, he thought to himself. Chapter 4, The Unexpected. There were very rare occasions where Luffy got to ride a bullhead, most of them involving friends like Ed during his huntsman career. It was at this point that he remembered how boring it was. There is little room in this confined space and nothing interesting to look at. As awesome as it may be, it's still painfully slow compared to his skywalk. Then there's the fact that they're completely helpless if they get attacked by Nevermores. Team STRQ took note of his impatience as he moaned and complained about how long it's taking. Kid, moaning is not gonna make the pilot go any faster. Kiro said in irritation, causing Luffy to pout at the drunk. But it's so boring. How can you sit here and wait? Luffy asked, perplexed by their patience. By finding something to occupy our time. If you're going to keep whining, then just go to sleep. Raven snapped at the boy. Luffy hummed at the idea, thinking he might just do that. I'd hold off on that nap, because I have visual on the academy. It'll be a few more minutes. The pilot spoke up, causing the eternal pirate to perk up. Really? He shouted before making his way to the cockpit. When he reached the cockpit, he was introduced to the sight of the castle-like academy. He could only grin in excitement as his gaze never left Beacon. Even though Ed used to go here, he never actually set foot on the school grounds since the retired huntsman already graduated by the time he met him. Whoa, it's so huge, he exclaimed in childish glee. The team rolled their eyes at his antics. Granted, they weren't better off when they first saw the school. The Straw Hat Boy can barely contain himself as they approach the landing pad while the four sweat drop at his behavior. It's like they're staring at a 5-year-old who can't wait to go to the amusement park. When the bullhead touched the ground and opened the side door, Luffy sprung out with a wide grin and spun about to take in his surroundings as Team STRQ followed. He sure does find joy in the little things. Summer commented, earning nods from her teammates. They joined their new friend to see some wandering students staring at the newcomer, although Luffy ignores the curious eyes. Summer could only groan at the attention they're receiving. They may be one of the best teams in Beacon, but she'd be better off without all the stares pointed at her. She's just as normal as any other person and not some special prodigy. The trip to the headmaster's office didn't make it any better as everyone turned to look at Luffy as he continued to soak in the sights within the halls. Summer. A stern voice made its way to their ears. Said woman stiffened at the familiar sound and turned to its owner with a sheepish expression. Oh, hey, Glinda. Summer greeted her fellow third year, sweating bullets at the woman's frown. Glinda is a young woman with blonde hair tied into a bun and green eyes behind oval glasses. Her attire suits that of a librarian with a white dress shirt, black business skirt, leggings, and black boots. Hello, Ms. Stick in the Mud. Why are you scowling this time? Kiro asked, earning a tick mark from the woman. She kept her composure in favor of addressing her problem. You better have a good reason for bringing a complete stranger into school grounds. Glinda interrogated the team leader, who only sighed. We didn't really bring him. He just decided to tag along with us, whether we like it or not. Summer muttered. If they had any power to convince him to not come, he wouldn't be with them now. Sadly, he won't listen to anyone once he makes up his mind. If it makes you feel better, he's the reason that we finished our mission so quickly. Tai Yang added. Sure, Ed and the town guard did their part, but it's nothing compared to Luffy single-handedly taking out a large Nevermore and the bandit leader. I doubt one person can drastically change the outcome. Glinda gave the boy a glance, incredulous at the thought. Yeah, well, you never seen him one-shot Grim with his fists. Wait, why are we having a debate over this? You're not one of the faculty. Whether the kid is allowed to stay or not is the headmaster's call. Kiro argued a point. I can still remind you of the rules. Glinda countered. Raven growled in annoyance as the argument carried on more than it needed to be. Then thank you for the reminder. Now if you don't mind, stop taking up our time and let us report back to the headmaster. A student must be punctual after all. Raven cuts down the conversation with clear irritation, using the rules that Glinda practically worships against her. Seeing the two break away from each other brought a satisfied grin to her face. When they were about to move on, Kiro looked around to see something amiss. Where's the kid? He asked, bringing wide eyes to his teammates. They joined the search for any signs of a straw hat but couldn't find any. Goddammit, Luffy, they shouted in unison. They would go look for him, but opted to speak to the headmaster first before going on a manhunt. Meanwhile, Luffy went off on his own when they were still talking to Glass's lady. Amidst the exploration, he found the dormitories, the classrooms, and the arenas. Most importantly, he also discovered the cafeteria. Paying a quick trip to the kitchen, Luffy soon came out with a stick of meat in both hands. Luckily, no one ever spotted him when he pilfered them. Being chased out of Beacon would put a hamper on the plan to hang out with Summer and her team. After walking around a bit longer, Luffy comes to a stop as he takes in the sight of the tower. His eyes sparkled with how high it was. This will be the perfect vantage point to try and find Team STRQ. He ate what's left on the first stick of meat before he snapped the bone in two and devoured that as well. He placed the second piece of meat in his mouth before stretching his arms to the top of the tower. He reeled himself up until he got to the glass window at its peak and peered inside. Dangling from the roof, he was able to spot his new friends along with another person. Said man was rather young with black hair wearing spectacles and a black suit with a green undershirt and scarf. Summer and the others flinched as they saw Luffy giving a meat-filled grin behind Headmaster Ozpin. At least it saves them the time to look for him, although they fear as to where he procured the food he has. Is something wrong, you four? Ozpin asked after seeing the change in expression. They were just reporting in on their mission, and now they're making silly faces. Turning around to see if there's something behind him, he was introduced to a young boy hanging outside the window. He slides the glass panes to the side to greet him. Enjoying the view? Ozpin asked in amusement, earning a nod from Luffy as he can't speak with food in his mouth. He's the extra help we were talking about earlier. You know, the MVP of our mission. Taiyang joked, getting a hum in response. The headmaster steps aside for Luffy to swing himself inside and land on the desk. The others bided their time until Luffy finished his food. They were shocked when the rubberman chowed down on the bone, too. That can't be healthy, they thought with a sweat drop. Ozpin cleared his throat to grab his attention. Could you explain how you reached my office without the elevator? He wondered in curiosity. There was no climbing gear on his person, and yet he still managed to reach the top of the tall building. Whatever he did, it doesn't change the fact that he has quite a way of getting around. He can stretch his body like rubber. Summer informed with a sheepish look. Ozpin quirked a brow at the answer until Luffy pulled his cheeks to impossible lengths. That's rather interesting. I suppose this isn't from a semblance since his physical makeup is altered, the headmaster observed, taking it all in stride. While there were a variety of semblances, none of them in recorded history could alter human flesh into a different material. This is the result of something completely foreign to him. It can't ever be a semblance because he doesn't have an aura. No, that's not right. It's more like his aura is forever bound in chains. Summer explained, confusing the headmaster. Bound in chains. He urged her on to explain what she meant. The team leader proceeded on telling him all that they learned about Luffy while the boy just stood beside the rest of the team. So who's he? Luffy asked. The three turned to him as if he grew a second head. How do you not know Ozpin? He's an influential figure among the council, as well as the headmaster of Beacon. Taiyang ranted in disbelief. The fact Luffy didn't know makes him wonder if Luffy is well-traveled. ... So he's an important person. Luffy tilted his head, causing them to slump. Congrats, Luffy. You get an A+ for figuring that much out. Kiro gave a mocking clap to the idiot. As the four were having their conversation, Ozpin cupped his chin in thought after Summer explained the devil fruits as Luffy told her. While it's unfortunate to lose such mystical fruits, it was probably for the best if they tend to corrupt people with power that surpasses many of the semblances. Though it does bring to question if every devil fruit has been buried at sea. Either way, this is the first time he's ever heard of it, and he's one of the headmasters. A person without aura, and yet he has a body that defies all logic. From what you four have witnessed, you said that he kills Grim in one hit. He asked, delighted to hear of such a potential individual. For the most part, yes. The only time he didn't one-shot a Grim was when he used his body as a bullet to ram into a Nevermore. Even then, it still went flying back. Summer confirmed, he might as well be a Grim repellent. Whenever he touches them, they get sent flying far away from him. This only emboldened Ozpin to try to recruit Luffy. The young man would no doubt be a huge asset in the battle against the dark creatures. He schooled his expression before attempting to persuade him. Luffy, was it? The eternal pirate looked to him in question. Since you desire to be with them, why not enroll in this school and become a huntsman? Ozpin proposed, shocking Team STRQ with the offer. He was confident that Luffy wouldn't say no. What young man would be insane enough to not take this golden opportunity? Summer was very thankful that Ozpin would consider this. Now Luffy can roam around campus without actually trespassing. Huntsman. Everyone were on the edge of their seats as they waited for an answer. No way. Luffy completely shot down the offer. The rejection didn't hit them for a few seconds. But when it did, their jaws hit the floor at the unexpected reply. I don't wanna be a huntsman. I'm the Pirate King, Luffy declared. That's just a self-proclaimed title. Raven rebuked with sharp teeth. She thought he was joking around the first time, but it seems that he was actually serious about it. The Straw Hat Captain pouted in annoyance at that. While the world has forgotten about pirates and One Piece, he will not deny what he is. It was his dream since he was a boy, and so many died during their journey to search for the legendary treasure. Whether it was real or not didn't matter. Just reaching Raftel, an island that was only explored by the previous Pirate King, was proof enough that the entire world was your oyster. He is not going to surrender his title for something so little in comparison. So what if huntsmen were the new trend, or if they can earn a living? They may be cool and all, but he doesn't have any desire to be one. Then there was the part where they have to follow orders, which definitely earns a no in Luffy's book. The Pirate King. Forgive me, but you sure don't look the part. You don't even act the part if you go out of your way to save a small town. Ozpin said as he shook himself out of the shock. He never imagined hearing anyone reject his offer, much less in a harsh manner. But he'll humor the boy and his proclaimed title. Looks don't matter at all. As a pirate, I have the freedom to do whatever I want. I'm not giving it up just so I can take orders from you or anyone else. Luffy argued his point to the headmaster with conviction, only to earn quirked brows from those around him. That was an interesting way to see pirates. It's nothing like the terror of the seas they would depict them to be. The two maintained eye contact as a form of challenge. Ozpin peered into Luffy's eyes and felt that he was not going to budge from his stance. He's never really met someone as stubborn or determined as the boy before him. I take it that means that even if you weren't allowed on school grounds, you would still stay with them anyway. The only decisions you follow are your own as well as the others you decide to listen to. Ozpin mused, earning a nod from Luffy. Now he's in a bit of a bind. He can't let this chance slip past him, but the young man made it clear that he has no intention of being a huntsman. The headmaster has no choice but to work out a compromise. The council will not like the idea of a person with no affiliation aiding him, much less someone who claims to be a criminal. They'd want to be certain they can trust Luffy. You drive a hard bargain, Luffy. Ozpin muttered with a sigh. The team gaped at their headmaster in disbelief. Was he actually going to give in to his demands? Does this mean, yes, I suppose this could be arranged? He relented, seeing no other alternative that'll make Luffy comply to be a huntsman and stay here. He'll just have to deal with the consequences later. Yay, thanks Ozzy. Luffy cheered like a little kid. Now he won't have to force his way in now that he has Ozpin's permission. The team couldn't believe how easy it was to convince the headmaster. Granted, Ozpin always sought out people with great potential and makes it a goal to get as many strong allies as possible. Even if the person was a criminal, he would offer them a second chance no matter the complaints he would receive later. He can be so forgiving at times. The group of 5 soon left his office, leaving Ozpin to sigh at the predicament he got himself in. He can only hope this won't be a mistake to add to the tally. With nothing left to do, he fishes out a catalog for coffee blends from his desk. As he read through the pages, he felt like he forgot something. Walking outside the tower, the team were left in a daze as the events sunk into them. They never thought that Luffy would treasure his freedom above an occupation that everyone hopes to be. Said boy had a grin plastered on his face as he strode beside them with a sense of accomplishment. I can't believe he's allowing this. Raven rubbed her head, already sensing the headache that will spawn from this. Well, he is. But where is he going to sleep? Kiro brought up. Everyone stopped at the question. They never took any consideration into his sleeping arrangements. There's not enough room for a 5th bed, which leaves them to sharing one bed. I'm not sharing a bed with him. Raven said flatly. Summer agreed alongside her as it would be unnerving to have a boy they know nothing about sleeping next to them. I'm sorry, but we're not sharing either. Taiyang argued for him and Kiro. While they could see what they're coming from, it would be just as weird if 2 guys were in the same bed. Then I'll sleep on the floor. Luffy deadpanned. He doesn't really care one way or another as he could sleep just about anywhere. No way. If you're staying with us, you need an actual bed to sleep in. Summer argued. The inn was one thing, but she couldn't live with herself if she let the boy catch a cold because of how stingy they're being. Then 2 of you can sleep in one bed while he takes the other. Glinda startled them with her sudden arrival. The proverbial light bulb lit above their head as the woman solved their problem. Huh, I never thought of that. That's pretty smart, glasses lady. Luffy praised, irking the woman with the nickname. My name is Glinda, and I was only trying to end this trivial matter before it becomes a shouting match, she corrected as she kept her composure in check. Oh okay, Splenda. Luffy butchered her name, earning a snort from Kiro. He could have sworn he heard that name somewhere. It's Glinda. The blonde woman growled out. It wasn't helping that the drunk was getting a kick out of this. Oh, sorry, Simba. Luffy corrected himself, but still got it wrong. The fuming woman gave up on the boy as he can't seem to get it right. Okay, well, I guess that means Raven gets to cuddle with me tonight. Is that alright? Summer turned to the woman in question. I suppose that'll work. Can't really stand sleeping next to Kiro, and Tai might get some funny ideas. Raven agreed, sending sharp looks at the two. Kiro may be her brother, but they would always be at each other's throats over the simplest things. This includes sharing a bed since he always hogs it. You wound us so. Taiyang hunched over in depression, feeling offended at her remark. She has to give him more credit than that. Oh suck it up, Tai. Come on kid, Raven and I will take you to our dorms. Kiro gestured the young man to follow him and his sister. Can we eat first? Luffy asked as he placed his hands over his belly. You already ate. Team STRQ shouted at him. Seeing him with a stick of meat in his mouth was evidence enough that he found the cafeteria and helped himself to some food. Ah, fine. Luffy whined with a pout before following Kiro and Raven to their dorm. I don't understand what Professor Ozpin was thinking in letting him attend this school. Glinda commented with a mutter as she watched the 3 grow more distant. He can be a bit of a child, but just wait till you see Luffy fight. I swear to you, heads will spin once he lands a hit or breaks a weapon with his bare arms. Summer defended the childish pirate. Let's not forget how he got rid of the negativity in the town. Taiyang mentioned. The strength he carried with him was an eye-opener for them, but the way he brought the air out of despair made a huge difference too. With all these praises, Glinda had to note that there may be some truth into Luffy's ability. Right now, none of that has been confirmed, so she'll have to take it with a grain of salt. You seem to hold him in high regard, Glinda pointed out, earning sheepish expressions. I'm sorry. He just has that air about him. I don't know what it is, but it really draws us towards him. Summer tried to explain. Glinda quirked a brow at the explanation. The traits she's describing sound like that of a leader, strong as well as having a charm that subconsciously pulls people in. So you're saying he's charismatic? Glinda surmised. That's one way of putting it. Too bad he has no intention of being a huntsman. Taiyang blurted out with a shrug. It takes him a second to realize that saying that to a rule-abiding student wasn't going to end well. Glinda slowly turned to him as her eyes twitched. What? She growled out. The blonde backed away from the woman with beads of sweat rolling down his face while Summer facepalmed at his defensive action, thinking this could be diffused with more details. The two already made an agreement, Glinda. Luffy is with us, but he won't be partaking any classes like a student should. As long as he doesn't cause too much trouble for Professor Ozpin, it'll probably stay like that. Summer explained. Her words didn't seem to calm Glinda down in the slightest. In fact, her scowl only deepened. This is a prestigious school for the young men and women from combat schools to attend if they wish to hone their skills and knowledge to become huntsmen. She thought Luffy came here with that goal in mind, but she was wrong. He's only here because he wants to stick close to Summer and her team. And Ozpin finds this acceptable. Well, she certainly doesn't. The blonde woman left them with a huff as she stewed over the irresponsible decision. It was unfair to everyone else if he just allows a person with no intention of being a huntsman in the academy. That went better than expected, Taiyang said. Summer doesn't seem to agree as she bops him on the head. It would have been great if you didn't open your big mouth, she said with irritation, earning a sheepish look from the brawler. This could spell trouble later down the road. Hopefully, Luffy will use that charisma and alter her opinion of him. Luffy followed the twins throughout the building until they stopped in front of a door that Raven was fixing to unlock with her scroll. He stared at the device in interest as an audible click was heard before she opened the door. So those things are also keys? Luffy wondered as they entered the room. The two turned to him with quirked brows, confused by the way he worded it. Do you not have any experience with scrolls? Kiro asked. I do, but all I did was play games on the one Ed has when I was bored. Luffy explained. He didn't really see much use other than that, so it wasn't something on his wish list. He did learn from Ed that it's used for communication, like a high-tech version of the transponder snails from his time. But since he subconsciously keeps himself out of contact from new people after a while, there just wasn't any point to having a scroll for him. The twins shared a disbelieving look at this. He must be from a rural area if he has little experience with the device. Anyway, I had something to ask you. Is that the only set of clothes you own? Because there's going to be a problem if that's the case. Raven warned. Neither of the guys had any spare clothes that would fit him since they were both bigger than him. How is it a problem? Luffy tilted his head in confusion. The sibling's sweat dropped at him as Summer loomed over him with a twitching eye. It should have been plain as day that he had no possessions when they met. But his disregard for hygiene really irked the redhead. Feeling a presence next to him, Luffy tilted his head up to see Summer. It's a problem when you have to bathe or throw them into the laundry. What would you have to wear when that one set needs to be cleaned? Summer tested him. Then I guess I'll be naked until it's clean. Luffy shrugged, earning facepalms from the others. Tick marks grew on the leader's head as she grabbed a fistful of his cheeks and stretched them apart. Well, I'm not going to let you walk around in your birthday suit. There are girls here. Summer denied his answer with shark teeth. The eternal pirate groaned as she continued to stretch his cheeks. Women always have this obsession with baths, with Nami as a prime example. Fine. I'll go to my home and grab some clothes, okay. Luffy relented, referring to his ship named the Thousand Sunny that was left in Raftel. May as well have left it there to prove that Frankie's pride and joy has explored all that there was in the world. Even after all this time, it still remains. The problem was the entire trip itself. He could always use the eternal pose that he found on the island, but what about getting back? His sense of direction was as poor as it was when he was still mortal. The magnetic waves from the islands along the Grand Line have grown weak enough to where normal compasses function all around the world. Weak as the waves may be, the eternal poses can still track the islands that they're set to. Normally, you would need a log pose to point from one magnetic island to the next until it reaches the end. But with the return of the old-fashioned compasses in conjunction with winds blowing through the calm belt, the log poses have lost their use. The Grand Line may as well have fused with the Four Blues. Wait, you have a home. I thought you were a nomad with what Ed told us. Taiyang made his presence known with his outburst. Luffy gave the bewildered man a nod. Why did you leave your home, then? Raven inquired with crossed arms. Silence followed her question as Luffy wore a frown, his sad eyes hidden behind his hat. Because there's no one there. It would just be me. Luffy answered in a solemn tone, recalling how lively it was at one point. Now there's nothing but an eerie atmosphere that gives off a ghost town vibe. He loves the sunny and all, but without his crew it wasn't enjoyable to stay in. Team STRQ were left with the assumption that he has no family left, making them feel guilty for treading upon the subject. It became evident to the four that he can't stand being alone. The boy travels around to interact with others because there's no one waiting for him back home. In the end, they're staring at a lonely soul. I'm really sorry for bringing that up. Would it help if we came along? Summer suggested, thinking he would feel better with some company. Before he could tell her, no, there was a knock on the door that caught their attention. Standing at the doorway was Ozpin with a box next to him. It slipped my mind that you came here with no possessions, so this should suffice until you visit your home. Even if you're not a student, you should at least look the part. Ozpin said as he overheard a bit of the conversation. Luffy pulled the box in and opened it up. His gaze fell upon the few uniforms that would help him blend in with the school instead of drawing attention. Ooh, so it's like a disguise. Like what those spies wear. Luffy's eyes sparkled at the thought. Ozpin grinned in amusement of his imagination. When you say it like that, it reminds me of some of those movies. Taiyang cupped his chin as he tried to remember. Hey, give me a martini. Shaken, not stirred. Kiro quoted a phrase from the movie, knowing what the blonde was thinking. That's the one. Taiyang's eyes lit up as it became clear, earning sweat drops from the girls. Luffy just stood confused as he looked between the two guys. I have no idea what you're talking about, but at least I don't have to leave yet. I probably would have gotten lost on my way back. Luffy admitted, getting dull looks from everyone. He can find his way back home, but he'll get lost on his return trip. How is that possible? So there's no telling how long you would have been away. Summer exclaimed, getting a nod from the boy. Raven rubbed her temples in aggravation for his lack of planning. That was a close call, then, she muttered. He just got here with the intention of staying by their side. It'd kinda defeat the purpose if he left for an unknown amount of time. I suppose I should leave you to rest after your mission, Ozpin said before taking his leave. As soon as the door closed, Summer clapped her hands to gain her team's attention. Alright, since we don't know when Luffy had a bath last time, he's going first, she declared. Luffy was about to open his mouth to argue, but one sharp look from the woman and he decided not to test her patience in fear of her wrath. So he settled for pouting as he heads for the bathroom. The team leader felt satisfied as she soon heard the sounds of the shower entered her ears. With nothing to do in the meantime, Kiro wanted to bring something up to his sister. Hey Raven, about those bandits that attacked the town. Do you think I doubt they have any association to our tribe. Weaklings like that aren't worth making an alliance with. Raven abruptly cuts him off. If their bandit tribe was going to form any alliances, they would need to be strong enough to be seen as a benefit. It's always about strong and weak with you, Kiro stated with a roll of his eyes. Because that's how the world works. A kingdom won't last without a strong infrastructure, and an army will not survive with weak grunts. Raven held fast to her beliefs. Seeing the argument escalate, Taiyang placed himself between the siblings to block out the looks they're giving each other. Enough of this. She has her beliefs, and you have yours. Stop trying to force it down each other's throats. He yelled at the two. Summer sighed in relief to see the bickering stopped. Raven would always have a difference in ideology compared to the rest of them. Things tend to get more heated when she talks to her own brother, oddly enough. Guess siblings can't agree on everything, even if they grew up in a bandit tribe. The room returned to being quiet with the exception of the shower that Luffy's taking. After a bit of time, the shower stopped and Luffy came out minutes later with just his shorts and sash. He'll be changing out of them the next day, so it should be fine. He looked over the four and noticed how quiet they're being. He must have missed something. Luffy shrugged his shoulders before plopping down on the empty bed, figuring that it's none of his business. Good night, guys, Luffy said. Good night, they replied in unison. Team STRQ took their turns with the shower until they were all in their pajamas. Geez, why does he have to sleep half naked? Summer groaned as she stared at Luffy as he snored the night away. Why do you keep staring at him? Kiro shot back with a teasing grin. Summer puffed her cheeks at this. She can't help it if that scar was so distracting. When they saw the shattered moon outside the window, they all decided to turn in for the night. Remembering their new sleeping arrangement, Raven shifted herself closer to Summer on the bed. Before she could react, her leader wrapped her arms around the woman and pressed her face into the crook of her neck. Why must you always cuddle? Raven sighed at the girl next to her. Because it always feels nice. Summer chirped, earning an eye roll from Raven. Chapter 5, Under the Spotlight. Someone help me, Raven pleaded as she laid there with Summer wrapped around her. The redhead's face was nuzzled into her chest with a content expression as soft snores were heard. At some point during the night, the team leader subconsciously tightened her hold on the woman. Raven can't seem to wake her up with all the jostling around, much less free herself. Luffy was as happy as can be as he snoozed through her troubles. Kiro and Taiyang were already up as they stared in amusement of the woman's predicament. Meat, Luffy moaned in his sleep, earning sweat drops. So how are we going to do this? Taiyang questioned the drunk. Kiro held his chin in thought before a devious grin took form. How about an air horn? He suggested. The two glared him down for the horrible idea. And have an angry mob of faunus at our doorstep. No thank you. Taiyang turned down, being considerate of the species with heightened hearing. Just get one of them up. Raven sighed in exasperation. The men looked at each other and shrugged their shoulders. Kiro dug under his bed before pulling out a box. His sister raised a brow at this until he opened it and grabbed an aluminum pan and a can of whipped cream. Welcome to the team, kid. Kiro muttered with a grin as he sprayed whipped cream inside the pan. He walks up to Luffy and spikes the pan onto his face with a splat. ... No response. I thought that would work. He ruffled his hair as the idea met failure. Suddenly, they heard a strange noise from the Straw Hat Boy. When the pan fell off to the side, it revealed his face with bits of whipped cream while the pan was literally licked clean. Raven stared at her brother with a twitching eye. She couldn't tell if he actually tried or if he done this to humor himself. Plan B, then, Taiyang said as he took his turn. The blonde pinched Luffy's nose and mouth shut and kept it like that until the boy started to squirm. His eyes shot open when his body wasn't getting a puff of air, signaling Tai to release his hold. The brawler dusted his hands off as Luffy took in a breath before giving him a pouty look. What was that for? And what's this white stuff on my face? Luffy inquired as he swiped up some whipped cream with his finger. Let's just say that Kiro wanted to give you a facial. Raven quipped with half-lidded eyes. She's starting to get impatient as they're busy goofing off when Summer is still attached to her. The two guys were choking on air at the dirty joke, horrified that she would joke like that at all. Luffy raised a brow at the explanation until he saw the problem she was in. The eternal pirate could only laugh at her plight, which irked her even more. Don't just stand there and laugh. Help me, she yelled with sharp teeth. Okay. Luffy placated her with a few giggles. He hopped off the bed and puts a finger in his mouth, tasting the whipped cream all the while. They quirked a brow at him as he popped it out of his mouth, all wet with saliva. He aims the wet digit towards Summer's ear, barely containing his dark chuckles. Oh boy, the three thought as Luffy's finger plunged into her ear canal. The effects were instant as Summer had a shiver travel down her spine with her eyes shooting open. She woke up with a shriek, releasing Raven from the prison known as cuddling. She turned to Luffy with a furious look before giving him the beating of a lifetime. A minute later, the boy laid on the floor in a heap with his face black and blue. I'm sorry. Luffy choked out as Summer patted her hands off. Honestly. The leader huffed with her hands on her hips, her hair disheveled from the beating. The two men stepped away from the woman as she went to the bathroom with clothes in hand. I appreciate you freeing me, Luffy. Raven said as she got up and stretched. The two men stared incredulously as she gave such a casual, thank you. He deserved far more than that after suffering a beating. After Summer came out with her school uniform, everyone else took their turns. When Luffy came out, they see that he didn't put on every piece of the uniform. He's only wearing the white dress shirt and black dress pants, both rolled up to show his forearms and shins. The sandals, sash, and straw hat stayed on him. The team shrugged at his disregard for dress code. Not like the school is excessively strict on the topic. A lot of the students tend to stick with their combat attire, which is sometimes questionable at best. The uniform is more of a formality if anything. In Luffy's case, however, it was a necessity since he only had the clothes on his back. After a quick breakfast, they proceeded towards class. Based on what they told him, Luffy could only dread as it is mostly lectures. It spelled nothing but boredom as he preferred to learn through hands-on experience. Sometimes he was thankful that he didn't go through school when he was a kid. They entered the classroom for grim studies to see a familiar face among the row of seats. Glinda takes note of their arrival while putting Luffy under speculation. The eternal pirate quirked a brow at her behavior before he shrugged it off and took a seat with Summer's team. What did you do to piss her off? Kiro asked in a hushed tone after he saw what Glinda was staring at. It looked like she was drilling holes into him with her eyes alone. Maybe she's mad that I got her name wrong. Luffy said. I doubt it was just a name. Raven countered with an incredulous look. Summer turned to Tai, who was keeping away from eye contact with a sheepish expression. I might have let it slip that Luffy isn't enrolling in Beacon. Didn't seem to like that very much, he muttered. Is that all? That's pretty stupid, Luffy commented. Well, you are in a school that accepts only the best. So far you have done nothing to prove that to her. It's nothing to worry about anyway. Raven assured them. She's still in the stage where she's judging a book by its cover like when they first met him. Once he actually does something, then that opinion will immediately shift. The bell rings as the professor enters the classroom and makes his way to the center. Said professor was a round man in the 30s with a brown mustache. His attire consists of a burgundy double-breasted suit with gold piping and buttons along with a pair of matching pants tucked into olive green boots. Man, I remember when Professor Port was a teacher's assistant back in our first year. Taiyang said as he was stuck in reminisce. Sadly, I remember when he tried to flirt with the female students. Summer said, causing Raven to feel a chill down her spine. Why was it always her? Although I wish he'd stop talking about his glory days. Raven muttered with an eye roll. He would spend most of the time in class telling stories from when he was a huntsman before coming here. None of it really involved the subject they're supposed to be studying. Just like she said, it didn't take 15 minutes until the professor started rambling on about his adventures. It wasn't long until everyone either nodded off or looked on in disinterest. Everyone except Luffy, whose eyes sparkled in curiosity of how the story goes. Team STRQ were surprised to see him paying attention to Port. "Doesn't this bore you at all?" Kiro asked in disbelief. Luffy turned to him with a finger up to his mouth, gesturing him to be quiet. "Shush, he's getting to the best part," Luffy chided. The drunk sweat dropped at the answer he got. Port clears his throat to actually stop himself from rambling, earning raised brows from the students. As much as he wants to continue, RWBYpin needed something else done. "I'm afraid I have to put my glorious tales on hold for the time being, for we have a new student among us," Port stated with a booming voice. All the youths had a similar thought to the news. "Why didn't you do that first?" They deadpanned. Seeing the stares caused Port to look sheepish for his blunder. Luffy's eyes darted all over the place in search of the new arrival. "Who is he talking about?" Luffy inquired in confusion. Summer and her team facepalmed at his stupidity. You idiot," they groaned in unison. "Oh, wait, I'm not even." Would the newcomer come down and introduce himself? Port instructed. Luffy sighs at the thought of being considered a student before making his way to the center where Port is. "Hi, I'm Monkey D. Luffy, and I'm the Pirate King," he introduced himself with joy. A lot of the students laughed at the boy's self-proclaimed title. Glinda's eye twitched as she heard the childish delusion he refers to himself as. "His name isn't even a color in any way. So you fancy yourself a swashbuckler of the seas, And pardon me, but I've never heard a name with a middle initial. What does it stand for?" Port asked with curiosity, ignoring the whole Pirate King title. The fact that there's someone with a middle name at all is very intriguing. "I don't know," Luffy replied honestly. He never bothered to learn about the Will of D that his era made a big fuss about. He knows Robin took interest in it, but the truth behind it isn't much of a priority to him. Everyone facefaulted at the short response. "But it's your name," the students shouted with sharp teeth. "Well, there goes that question," Summer muttered. It was something gnawing at her mind for a bit. But if Luffy doesn't know, then she may as well not bother looking for an answer. "Anyway, I wish to test your mettle against Grim, or Prey as I like to call them." Port lets out a boisterous laugh at his humor, but it fell on deaf ears. It was so quiet you could hear crickets chirping. "Sure, mustache guy." Luffy gave a jovial grin. Now, flattery won't get you anywhere." Port tried to wave off as he subconsciously brushed his facial hair with his fingers, causing Team STRQ to sweat drop. The professor couldn't help but take pride in his mustache. Growling noises reached Luffy's ears to gain his attention. When he turned to the source, he was surprised to see a cage with glowing red eyes inside. Through all the time in the classroom, he never noticed that it was there until now. A mystery cage that came out of nowhere. Luffy muttered as he stared at the object in wonder. "Correct. And inside it lies a way to prove yourself in front of your peers," Port proclaimed. He was about to destroy the lock with his blunderbuss and battleaxe hybrid until he noticed Luffy's lack of weaponry. "Do you need a weapon?" He thought he'd ask just in case. Luffy shook his head before raising his fist to gesture his fighting style. PFF'd. Cocky kid thinks he can take on Grim with his bare hands. One of the random students mocked his choice, earning a tick mark from Tai. Did they not know that he uses his fists too? The Straw Hat Kid waits for his opponent to reveal itself once Port busted the lock. What came out of the cage was disappointing to say the least. It was just one Borbitusk. That's it. Luffy gave Port a deadpanned expression while pointing at the boar. He made no effort to hide his disappointment. "It's not like we can just bring a Deathstalker in the classroom," Port defended. Glinda sat quietly to see how things play out before noticing the bored looks Team STRQ showed. Was a Borbitusk far too weak for Luffy's level? The Grim made the first move with a head-on charge by curling into a ball and rolling towards him. Luffy made no movement as he imbued armament into his arm, gaining their attention. He held out his hardened arm to block the attack. When it made contact, sparks flew as the armor continued to grind against the tip of his fingers. Eventually, the spinning slowed to a crawl before it stopped completely. Everyone other than Team STRQ were shocked to see the rolling stop completely as Luffy's fingers dug into the armor. His gripping strength is great enough to leave indents in the armor. Glinda stood amazed at the feat. "Shishishi, I caught you." Luffy cheered before lifting it up and grabbing it by its curved horns. The Borbitusk wriggled in futility, but its stubby feet couldn't do anything. He released the creature before he punted it through the ceiling, leaving a small hole in its wake. Students gaped at the hole in awe and fear. As much as they're relieved to have a guy with immense strength on their side, they really don't want to get hit by that. Luffy sulked at the boring fight while everyone else wasn't looking. It was exhilarating to beat those that are stronger than you. Now he can't find anything that can hold up against him. He doesn't recall any Grim giving him a hard time, seeing as the beasts of Rusukaina were far more ferocious. So he's left to fool around to entertain himself, much to the ire of many of his opponents. Outside the building, RWBYpin was taking a relaxing stroll through the courtyard until he saw the Grim flying into the sky before evaporating into nothingness. That must be the one-hit wonders they mentioned, he mused to himself before taking a sip of his coffee. Back in the classroom, Port shook himself out of his stupor and cleared his throat to get their attention. Well, I think your demonstration left your peers reeling. Care to explain where you got that strength? Port inquired. With how the boy effortlessly took out a RWBYpiece, he's interested to hear any tougher challenges. I just fight really strong opponents. Luffy explained horribly, causing every student to face foe. That doesn't explain anything, they rebuked with sharp teeth. While they can understand that challenging yourself can push you past your limits, it doesn't carry on to this extent. But it's the truth. Luffy shot back. Summer's thoughts trailed off to the devil fruits. Having so much experience with them could imply that Luffy fought his fair share of encounters with powers beyond their comprehension. Following that train of thought, she could see where most of his challenges came from. Port would have asked for more detail, the bell beat him to it. He sighed in discontent, but figured that he'll have more chances to talk with the boy. The students packed their things for their next class with disgruntled expressions, unsatisfied with the vague answer they got from Luffy. They really wanted to know where he got such amazing physical ability, especially Glinda. Since there are strength-amplifying semblances, could it be that? It would explain the metallic arm if it wasn't for the knowledge that semblances can't cause changes in body composition. Maybe aura control like Tai Yang, but to a godlike extent. That theory was a bust too. Someone so young couldn't possibly reach such feats. She can't stand seeing something that she can't fathom. It frightens her. How can Summer and the others take that in stride? The blonde woman will have to put those thoughts on hold for the time being while they go through the rest of today's classes. Team STRQ were behind her as she left her musings, all with concerned looks. I think the kid's demonstration was too much for her to handle. Kiro surmised. If anything, Luffy might have scared her. Tai added. If she's scared of him now, I can't wait to see her expression when he stretches his limbs. Raven added her 2 cents, a wry grin on her lips at the thought. Glinda is probably stuck in the mentality of it being a result of aura, when it's actually a mix of physical prowess and a fruit that could only be a myth. Raven, we don't need her suffering a meltdown. She needs to see for herself why Ozpin allows Luffy to be here. Summer chided. Why should her opinion of me matter? Luffy asked with a tilted head. Summer turned to him with wide eyes at the question. Why? Are you saying you don't care either way? She exclaimed, earning a nod from the boy. It's not like he was expected to be liked when he chose to be a pirate. Popularity was a lame reason to take up piracy. While it was cool to have a high bounty, he only did it for the thrill and adventure. The 4 students had to respect him for that. He doesn't allow himself to be shackled by public opinion, something that people have trouble doing. Many people cling desperately to their fame when they're in a pinch, to the point that they'll stoop low to keep it. Seeing that Luffy is indifferent with how people see him, they shelve the problem away for now. They want him to feel like he's welcome at Beacon, more so with Summer. But since his peers don't affect him, then it's a bit moot point. Classes proceeded without any problem. Perhaps it's the lack of hands-on work in certain classes like history. The lectures bored Luffy to death, to which he just went to sleep. The team noticed that Glinda hasn't been looking their way as often since grim studies. She does give them a glance before shaking her head in disapproval when she spots the slumbering boy. Summer knew things were going to transpire once they reach combat practice. If grim studies proved anything, it was that Ozpin is orchestrating things so he can witness Luffy's skill. He tends to have video footage of each fight the students participate in. Right now, they're sitting in the stands that surround an arena. For once, Glinda sat next to them with crossed arms. Man, I slept great. Luffy cheered as he stretched his arms above his head. The 5 sweat dropped at his easygoing demeanor. You don't do well with listening, do you? Summer surmised, earning a pout from him. Hey, I listen. It was just so boring to listen to that guy go on and on about the past. Luffy argued. Did you expect for school to be all fun and games? Raven shot back with an incredulous look. No, I was hoping that they would try to make it a little fun so everyone doesn't fall asleep. Luffy said. He wasn't foolish enough to think that school was as simple as that. While it is a place to learn, how can the students learn anything if their minds wandered elsewhere? Well, when you put it like that. Kiro was starting to see the point he's making. It doesn't change the fact that our history is important. We learn about mankind's history in order to avoid the same mistakes they have done back then. Glinda spoke up, startling the others with her sudden inclusion. But what if there was another story we don't know about? How would we learn then? Luffy inquired. We have historians and archaeologists for a reason, Luffy. Glinda rolled her eyes at the question. However, she was oblivious to the weight of the question since she's out of the loop of what Team STRQ know. Said team knew what he was referring to, seeing as they also wondered about the existence of mystical fruits. For all they know, there could be a fragment of history that's far out of their reach. However, they don't know that Luffy was referring to the poneglyphs. Without Robin, the history inscribed on the unbreakable blocks won't ever be deciphered. Amidst their discussion, the professor in the center of the arena was combing through the roster of the class on his scroll with a laid-back demeanor. Like Port, he was given orders to set a match with the newcomer. Now that he's proved himself in front of a camera, let's see how he does against a person. Would the new student care to show himself down here? He requested in a lazy tone. Luffy felt his eye twitch at that. I'm not a student, he muttered in annoyance, but nonetheless complied as he made his way to the arena. Glinda quirked a brow at his irritation, wondering why he's so vehement on being a huntsman. I almost feel bad for who's going to be the guinea pig. Kiro sighed as he can imagine the outcome before it starts. Money is on Luffy sending the poor guy through the wall. Taiyang gambled with certainty. Mine's on his fist erasing aura in one punch. Raven piped in, willing to humor the blonde. Mylene is saying he'll play with his food for a bit. Kiro smirked in confidence. You realize that you're betting against his opponent, right? Glinda shouted. Safest bet. The trio claimed in unison. Glinda groaned at the three's antics before looking to their team leader with some hope. You three should be ashamed of yourselves. Summer muttered in disapproval. Her teammates turned to her with wide eyes as she scolded them. The blonde woman couldn't help but smile at how serious she's being. Seriously. Haven't you ever considered that he can do all three at the same time after seeing what he could do in our mission? She said with a gleam in her eyes. Glinda face-faulted as she retracted her statement. Summer was no better than her teammates. The guys gasped in horror at their mistake while Raven rolled her eyes. Shit, you're right, what were we thinking? Taiyang gripped his head in panic at the thought of losing Lean. Meanwhile, Luffy stood in the arena waiting for the lazy professor to choose his opponent. He looks around to see some of the students shrink away in futility, making themselves as small as possible so they don't get picked. They might have been the ones that saw him as he sent the RWBYpiece packing. Let's see, who has the biggest ego right now, the professor wondered to himself. The one thing that bothers him the most are the people who think they're hot shit for being unbeatable. If RWBYpiece needs combat data from the boy next to him, then he would need to throw in someone who's high in spirit anyway. What better option than a person who has kept up the momentum? When he finally picked an appropriate candidate, the student's face popped up on the big screen with his aura bar full. The young man had a smug grin that screamed arrogance along with burnt orange hair. If he recalled correctly, he wasn't in the Grim Studies class to see the boy's demonstration. Who is that guy? Luffy asked while pointing at the screen. Your opponent, Finch Winchester. Now if he can save me the time of yelling out names, the professor quipped. Much to his fortune, the student stood up and revealed himself. The guy was incredibly tall compared to his peers and seemed buff under the armor he wore. Seriously, I thought they were going to give him a challenging opponent, not one that was easier than the RWBYpiece. Raven's remark went unnoticed by Finch as he glared daggers at her. Then why don't you volunteer instead of antagonizing everyone? Summer said with a twitching eye as she saw the glare the guy was giving. She just wanted to be as normal as anyone else here, but the spotlight on them isn't helping. He enters the arena with a battle axe holstered on his back, gaining a curious look from Luffy. Finch looked over the boy and sighed in disappointment. The dude didn't look like much seeing as he's short and lacks muscle mass. You expect me to fight this shrimp? He wondered incredulously. That's why your face is on the board. The professor waved off without taking his eyes off the scroll. He sees Luffy's grinning face and taps it to make it appear on the screen next to Finch's. His eyes widened slightly at the missing aura bar below Luffy. Mind telling me what this is about? He half demanded as his gaze was set on the eternal pirate. Huh, what are you talking about? Luffy tilted his head in confusion before Finch started laughing. You don't have an aura. How stupid can you be? His laughter bellowed throughout the room. Luffy wondered how he knew until he noticed that he doesn't have a green bar like Finch does. He was able to put two and two together after that. Nope, I don't have a green bar. I've always fought without one. Luffy said in a casual tone as he started to pick his nose. Out in the stands, those that were in Port's class with Luffy stared at the screen in disbelief. Many thoughts clouded their minds, but they shared one similarity. That was his actual strength. They thought in fear. To think there was someone that could achieve such a feat without aura. Well, the cat's out of the bag now. Kiro remarked, taking note of everyone's expressions. You knew. Why didn't you unlock it before having him fight Grim with you? Glinda snapped at them for their carelessness. The four were quiet for a moment as they tried to figure out how to explain it without revealing too much. They'd rather not have her try to digest all of this like they have. He's cursed to live his life without an aura. Were it up to us, he would have an aura. Summer spoke up. Glinda may have given her a look that called bullshit, but it's the best way to describe it. He was punished for eating a devil fruit. How else could she describe it? She doubts she can stick with the same thing once Luffy reveals that he can't swim since it is oddly specific. While the students were flabbergasted at the boy, said boy was busy cracking his knuckles. Wait, you're actually going to fight without it? You're not going to even ask to have it unlocked? Finch stood shocked at the crazy guy. Yup, if I end up hurt, then I only have myself to blame. Luffy replied. The professor hummed at the small bit of maturity, but still doesn't like the danger he's putting himself in. You should at least consider having it unlocked. I'd rather not clean up a mess because you're being stubborn, the professor tried to reason. Luffy lowered his head to where the rim of his hat shadowed his eyes. I don't want to waste your time doing the same thing everyone else tried. Don't take me lightly just because of that, though. Luffy warned. It was insulting to him when they believe he can't handle a bit of pain. The professor raised a brow at the mention of others that attempted to unlock his aura, but shoves the topic aside for now. If that's how you're gonna play, then I guess we can move along. Just don't say I didn't warn you, he said. Finch shook himself out of his stupor after hearing that. He stood ready with his battle axe held in both hands. The axe head split in half on both sides to reveal the barrel of a gun. So cool. Luffy stared in awe of the weapon's appearance. He always gets excited when he sees a melee weapon double into a gun. Begin. The professor signaled before yawning, debating on taking a nap. Finch wasted no time and rushed towards the boy with his weapon ready to swing. Reaching his destination, he gives a heavy swing from the side. Luffy takes a few steps forward and sticks his leg out to clash with the shaft. The big man was shocked to see that Luffy has easily stopped him. No matter how much more strength he adds, the eternal pirate wasn't budging. Gritting his teeth, the gun went off and sent his axe in the other direction and go for the other side. Luffy sees the attack and smoothly backflips over the axe. Luffy landed in a handstand as Finch spun on his heel and performed an overhead swing. With a loud clang, Luffy's feet clapped together to catch the head of the axe mid-swing. Why, you've gotta be kidding me. Finch's eye twitched in anger as he was struggling against the sandaled feet. There was no way that the power gap was this wide. The kid is supposed to be scrawny and weak. Now how am I going to make a quick trip to my home without getting lost on the way back? Luffy asked himself as he cupped his chin. Even with one arm on the ground, he's still holding the axe at bay. Don't ignore me, brat. Finch seethed with shark teeth. Luffy shifted to the side to let the axe slam into the ground next to him before he hopped back onto his feet. Finch roared in rage as he continued his onslaught on the eternal pirate. The spectators were left in awe as Luffy showed off his flexibility and agility by dodging every attack with monkey-like grace. Finch decided to switch things up by pointing the end of the shaft at point-blank range. Luffy quirked a brow at the weapon that was leveled with his head until he heard an audible click when Finch squeezed on the handle. A gunshot went off and sent Luffy's head jerking back from the force. It was then that everyone were reminded that Luffy had no aura. They were too focused on how well the boy was fighting to worry about him. The realization hit them like a truck as they looked on in horror. Even Finch couldn't believe what he did while blind with rage. Summer had her hands over her mouth while on the verge of crying. Even with someone as strong as Luffy, he can still die if you catch him off guard. Everything up until now has shown her the idea that he was invincible. She never really thought that he could be a glass cannon. The Pirate King's body backpedaled a bit before it stopped. Much to their confusion, the body didn't fall. Phew, that was close. Luffy said as his head went back into place to reveal that he caught the bullet with his teeth. He was used to taking bullets in the body, but never the head. Besides, the bullets in this era are a lot more modernized than the ones that the Marines used. Other than using armament to block the bullets, he probably won't take the risk of the pointy bullets tearing through him. Seconds passed as they tried to register that Luffy was not killed, but instead displayed an impossible feat. The audience felt their eyes pop out of their sockets at the sight. Their horror was replaced by amazement in an instant. Holy shit, that's badass. Kiro cheered with stars in his eyes, with Tai nodding his head in agreement. That doesn't explain how unnatural this is. Raven yelled, earning her team's attention. You mean how his teeth are strong enough to catch the bullet? Tai Yang inquired with a tilted head. It's not just that. How did he know the exact moment when Finch was about to fire and react fast enough to do that at point blank? She questioned, unaware that she has witnessed observation hockey at work. The three had thoughtful looks at the argument she made. When she puts it like that, it was kind of strange how he predicted it so perfectly. Luffy also looked like he was unaware of the hidden gun until it fired. Meaning we still don't know the full extent of his capabilities. Glinda spoke up, feeling her suspicions rise. Why yeah, he hasn't even shown all the things we already saw. Summer said, recalling Skywalk and his rubber body. Hell, there are all sorts of abilities that Luffy has yet to explain to them, like how he hardens his limbs. Luffy spits out the bullet and starts laughing, much to their confusion. Ha ha ha, that scared the hell out of me. That was pretty good. Luffy bellowed while everyone stared at him like he's insane, like he hasn't realized that he could have died. When he didn't hear Finch yell out a response, he turned to him to see what's wrong. The big guy's hands were trembling and his face was that of gaping shock. Finch was honestly glad that he didn't commit murder during a spar. He got too carried away when he wanted nothing more than to hit him. The armored teen blinked twice when a hand crossed his vision, causing him to look at Luffy. Are you okay? Luffy asked, worried about his unresponsive behavior. Finch could only give a small nod in response. That's a relief, because I want to end this right now, Luffy stated. Finch nodded dumbly before his words hit him. Wait wah, he was interrupted by a punch to the gut, making his body fold. His eyes rolled back and he coughed saliva before being flung to the wall on the other side, kicking up dust with the impact. When the dust cleared, his body was on the other side of the wall with the exception of his legs which were left dangling in their view. The audience went silent at the results before looking up at the screen to see Finch's aura empty. They audibly gulped at the power behind his fist. One blow from his fist was enough to crush their aura. Looks like Summer was right on the money. He did all three in that one fight. Kiro muttered, remembering their wagers. Their leader had a smug grin on her face for winning the bet. The grin disappeared as soon as it came as she recalled the danger Luffy put himself in. Yet they're making some stupid bet in spite of that. Luffy was scratching his head sheepishly, thinking he might have overdone it. Holding back is really hard. Luffy whined. Holding back? That wasn't all your strength. The professor stood bewildered at that. Luffy turned to him with hands on his hips. Well yeah, if I did that, I might kill him on accident. Luffy informed with a casual tone. Don't say that so bluntly, especially after he almost did the same thing to you. I want a peaceful nap, not one plagued with such a disturbing thought, the combat instructor deadpanned. Luffy chuckled at his obsession with sleeping, reminding him of Zoro. He jumped to where Summer and the others are. The medical team came by to pick Finch up and left for the infirmary, leaving the hole as proof for Luffy's actions. The class went on while Luffy's group talked amongst themselves. Phew, that fight made me hungry. Luffy commented, unaware of Summer's fuming face. Don't scare us like that, Luffy. You could have died from that stunt. Summer yelled. But I didn't, so it's fine. Luffy countered, confused as to why she's mad. They were left perplexed by his behavior. He laughs in the face of death and brushes it off as if it was no big deal. It leaves them to wonder if he even fears death. The bell rung to end the class as well as their thoughts. They were free to spend the rest of the day at their own leisure. Oddly enough, Glinda decided to tag along as they walked through the halls. It must be nice to be able to end any fight with one hit. Taiyang commented to start a conversation. Luffy frowned at the oblivious blonde. It's not all that it's cracked up to be, the eternal pirate said. Huh, being so strong is really boring. I like to fight, but it's no fun if I win with one punch, the Straw Hat Captain complained. I guess I see your point. Having a victory gift wrapped for you would make things pretty dull. Kiro agreed. You do realize you can get absolutely anything you want with such power though, right? Glinda narrowed her eyes as she implied on criminal acts. Neither police nor huntsmen can stop him from robbing places if he can beat them in one hit. Gee Glinda. Summer was appalled by the accusation. Luffy has already made a point in saying that power corrupts. The only thing I ever did was dine and dash. I don't need anything else. Besides, taking things just because you're strong sounds really stupid. Luffy said. He wasn't one for materialistic things aside from getting treasure. What kind of pirate doesn't like treasure? Glinda stared at him with dull eyes for the answer, taking note of how he admitted that he committed a crime. For someone who makes a childish claim of being this, Pirate King, you sure don't act the part. Glinda noted, curious as to why he behaves in such a way. Team STRQ were amused to hear the same thing Ozpin said. Luffy has grown used to hearing that as of late. Huntsmen are good and pirates are evil. They never considered the chance of corrupt huntsmen. Doesn't change how lame it is to hear such bland logic. No matter what happens, I won't be like those pirates. To me, pirates are the ones that desire freedom and adventure, with the Pirate King having the most. I refuse to be controlled, nor will I control others. Luffy declared his beliefs with conviction. The blonde woman blinked twice at his innocent explanation, seeing nothing but honesty in his eyes. So he sees their occupation as a threat to his precious freedom, hence why he declined his enrollment. All the pieces fell into place as she imagined how the conversation went, even without being present. Despite his claims as a criminal, he had no intention of seriously harming Finch. He could have waited for the town's destruction before scavenging its remains for food since the Grimm aren't a threat, but he didn't. She adjusts her glasses after getting a clearer picture of his character, now understanding what Ozpin saw in him. If those are his standards for being a pirate, then there is no need to worry about any malevolent intentions. Granted, his dine and dashing habits are a problem. Thank you for putting up with my behavior, was all she said before parting ways, her gratitude lost to Luffy. For now, she is content with the results of her personal investigation. The mysteries still present will unravel themselves in due time. Now that his kind nature is revealed, leaving those mysteries isn't as fearful as before. Luffy looked at her distant figure with a confused expression. Why is she thanking me? He tilted his head at the inquiry. After knowing Glinda for a bit, the others could decipher what she meant. You left a better impression on her. In other words, she finds you a little trustworthy now that you've shown a bit of your character. Raven informed. That's a relief. Summer sighed. Glinda means well and all, but the calculating stare she gives make her feel uncomfortable. As they walked back to their dorm, Luffy racked his brain for any feasible way to locate Beacon from Raftel. His face strained and steam poured out of his head in intense thought. Now that he thought about it, it has been a while since he returned to pay his respects to his friends. It shouldn't be that hard to find a way back, unless your home is nowhere near a city. Taiyang's statement broke Luffy out of his thoughts. Where is your home, anyway? For a guy that would have trouble getting back here, how can you know where home is from here? Kiro inquired. Luffy chuckled at the question before pulling out the eternal pose for Raftel and showing it to them. The odd object drew the attention of the four, making them scoot closer to inspect it. It looked like an hourglass with only one orb that has a needle floating inside. There was no indication of it point towards the north or south, but Raftel was written on the top. Is that supposed to be a compass? Summer guessed with a quirked brow, earning a nod from the eternal pirate. She only came to that conclusion because the needle had a red tip on one side. It's called a eternal pose. No matter where I am in the world, this will always point to my home. Luffy told them with a soft smile. He keeps it close to him so he can always return to the place where he became the Pirate King. That's pretty handy, but you can't really call it a compass if it points to only one place. Kiro argued. If anything, it would be more like a GPS system set to home. A shame that there's no such device that can direct you to where we are. Raven shrugged her shoulders. It may have sounded like wishful thinking, but it was a possible reality to Luffy. His eyes went wide as he recalled an item that can do exactly as she said. That's it. His shout caused them to jolt from the outburst. I would have said that it's nice to hear, but that shout left my ears ringing. Taiyang joked with a pained expression. Luffy rubbed his head sheepishly at that. Hee, sorry. Anyway, I could make a Vivre card to get to you guys. Luffy said. Feeling up for another lesson after going through the school day, the team had to wonder what that was. Vivre card. Summer voiced their question. Yeah, it's like the eternal pose, but it points to a person instead of a place. Luffy explained. They now understood how it would help them. If they're at Beacon while he's off to who knows where, then he'll still be able to get a general direction. It wouldn't matter if they went on another mission while he's away. So it's like a tracking beacon. What happens when that person dies, though? Raven questioned. The grin from his revelation faded at the thought. Not so much because they might die while he's absent, but more from a distant memory. When the person is dying, it starts to burn. But if the person is completely dead, then the Vivre card will burn to nothing. His tone was more somber compared to earlier, making them want to back away from the topic. So, how do you make one? Taiyang diverted the subject. It seemed to do the trick as Luffy perked up at the question. Oh, I just need a part of your fingernail, he answered with a straight face. The four blinked at him a few times, wondering if they heard him right. Fingernail. They tilted their heads with proverbial question marks, earning a nod from him. Well, I guess if it was meant to point to people, then it would make sense to have a literal piece of ourselves as an ingredient. Kiro found it reasonable, but why not blood? Wouldn't that have made more logical sense? Raven asked with crossed arms. Summer sighed at the dark theme her fellow woman was going for. Raven, we're making a special sheet of paper, not enact a ritual. Summer chided her. Luffy threw the woman a disgusted look as he picked his nose. Yeah, don't say such gross stuff. Luffy reprimanded, earning a tick mark from Raven. As if he had room to talk. How about you stop doing gross stuff? She countered, but Luffy continued to fish out boogers. While the two descended into a petty argument, Summer was under the realization that Luffy might leave very soon. The thought made her frown. They hardly spent a lot of time together, and now he's leaving so soon. You don't have to leave right now, right? Could you at least stay until the weekend? Summer pleaded, which earned some raised brows from her teammates. Realizing how desperate she sounded, Summer mentally facepalmed. Luffy tilted his head in contemplation, ignorant of her desperate tone. While he does need to go grab some of his belongings, he's not in any rush to leave. It's not like the Sunny is going anywhere. Sure, I'm not in a hurry or anything. His reply brought a smile to her face. She managed to squeeze out some more time from him. Time that could be used to get to the bottom of his facade. Recalling how she saw him wake from his nightmare back on her mission, she just can't leave Luffy to hide away his problems behind a smile. A huntress never backs down when a person is in need. Ozpin took a sip of his coffee as he watched the footage of Luffy's fights. His face betrayed any amount of amazement and intrigue when he saw the boy halt the Borbatusks rolling with his bare hands as well as the moment where he caught the bullet with his teeth. He hummed to himself as he thought of how he's able to do such feats so easily. Luffy has no aura, which would mean no semblance. He doubts that his blackened limbs are a byproduct of having a rubber body. And such a quick and odd reaction to gunfire is not something that even professional huntsmen can accomplish. Speaking of his rubber body, none of the footage showed him stretching his body. As if he didn't see the need for it. If it's not a part of having a rubber body, then what is it? He thought to himself, perplexed at the notion of not knowing the answer. Chapter 6, Raftel. The weekend came far too quickly in Summer's opinion. It felt like it was only yesterday since she started her personal mission to help Luffy with his nightmares, and she has yet to make any progress. Her confidence as a huntress are at stake here. She took up the occupation to help anyone in need. Whether it was saving people from Grim or themselves, she always strove to aid anyone in her reach. But now that Luffy is about to leave to this Raftel place, the team leader realizes that she won't uncover any clues while he's away. Which brings us to what is going on so early in the morning. Please take me with you, she asked for the umpteenth time. No, Luffy replied with a twitching eye, earning a pout from her. The rest of her team followed behind the two as the girl kept asking to travel to Raftel with him. They were walking out into the courtyard to see him off. They made sure to store a piece of their fingernail into tiny Ziploc bags, each marked with their first initial. She just won't let up. Taiyang commented with a shake of his head. It wasn't until Wednesday that she started asking him that in repeat. And he's not budging, Raven added. Kinda like a child that's begging their parents to take them to the amusement park. Kiro's remark got him a sharp look from Summer. Luffy sighed at the stubborn woman before turning to face her. Why do you want to come with me, anyway? I told you that I would come back, didn't I? He wondered. With the Vivre cards, returning to them should be easy. Because you said that no one is there waiting for you. I figured that you could use the company. Summer explained. It wasn't a lie. While she had other reasons to go, she did take his loneliness into consideration. Despite how he doesn't visit home that often, he still holds a strong attachment to it. She was hoping that by visiting his home, she could uncover some clues behind his nightmares. That time at the inn wasn't the only time that he tossed and turned. It also happened during a few mornings over the school week. She thought that she was making sense to him as he stood there and thought. However, he still didn't budge. Even if they're no longer alive, I still want to pay my respects. I'd rather be alone for that. Luffy explained to her, causing Summer to stiffen. She never considered that the people he cherished were buried there. If any of them were to come along, it would feel like an invasion of privacy. The eternal pirate was finally successful in dissuading her. To see her with such a sad frown made it hard for him to leave. Tai rubbed his head as he saw Luffy in an awkward scenario. Would you consider taking her some other time? Maybe not now, but whenever you feel comfortable, he requested. Summer perked up at this, silently thankful for the blonde's help. Luffy tilted his head in contemplation for the request. He can't recall a single person that he brought to Raftel, not even Ed. Then again, Summer was the first person to ever ask if she could join. Ed's request resurfaced in his mind. He needs to stop isolating himself if he wants to live alongside someone, but Raftel is like his personal sanctuary. I guess I could. Luffy relented, causing Summer to beam up at him. You better. That's a promise, she proclaimed. Speaking of Raftel, aren't you going to take an airship to get there? Raven wondered. Looking around, there wasn't a single airship in sight. Raven, he can walk on air. Who needs a metal coffin in the sky when you can do it yourself? Kiro pointed out with a roll of his eyes. Luffy nodded his head at the drunk's statement. The airships are far too slow compared to Skywalk, and he can't defend himself while he's inside the flying vehicle. He has to have some limit. If we tried that, our legs would get tired after a while. Raven argued, earning a pout from Luffy. Does she still underestimate his abilities? There have been times where he fought for hours on end without rest. I've done this plenty of times, Raven. I can even go to the snowy place if I wanted to. Luffy grumbled. Any further arguments from the black-haired woman died as she realized how stupid it was to argue against the guy that knows himself better than them. Snowy place? You mean the kingdom of Atlas? Summer wondered in amazement. If that was the case, he could get to just about anywhere in the world. What kind of beastly vitality do you have, Luffy? Taiyang added his own question with a comical shout, earning a laugh out of Luffy. I don't know what vitality is, but I just have to eat something at Raftel and then I can come back. Luffy informed. Even with the stamina he has, he'd rather not try to do it on an empty stomach. So there is some sort of limit. Kiro's sweat dropped, not really surprised that Luffy has to refuel for the trip back. The boy grinned at his new friends one more time before stretching his arms out to two lampposts. Gomu Gomu no rocket. The initial launch sent him high in the air with great velocity. When he was starting to fall, he used Skywalk to propel himself further through the air and continue on his way to home. With one hand on his hat to keep it in place, Luffy glanced back at Beacon to see it getting smaller and smaller as he traveled. Don't worry, guys. I will come back to you, he muttered to himself before turning his attention to Raftel's log pose, readjusting his direction according to the needle. Back at the courtyard, Summer and her team stare on as Luffy became no more than a speck in the distance. It feels so strange that he's no longer present, which is funny since he only spent a week with them. Summer, are you that dead set on discovering the source of his nightmares? Raven spoke up with half-lidded eyes. The team leader turned to her in shock for acknowledging his distress. You knew, she exclaimed in surprise, feeling upset that she hasn't tried anything to help. We wake up long before he does, and he sleeps in the same room as us. So of course we know. Taiyang deadpanned. Summer glanced between her teammates with a look of betrayal. All this time and they haven't said a word about it. With how frequent it is, anyone could see that it's not healthy to be plagued by nightmares for so long. But, why? Her soft voice pleaded for an answer. It's a guy thing. We're too stubborn to disclose any personal problems with anyone else. It could be out of pride, or maybe we just don't want to burden others with our problems. We never said anything about it because he hasn't either. Kiro explained, actually sounding serious for once. Summer frowned at the explanation, but maybe he has a point. Unlike her, her teammates don't feel obligated to comfort him. He never showed the need for it, so they just let him be. Ahem, they were startled by the presence of Glinda, who was just standing there as they conversed. Oh, Glinda. Summer was about to tell her how she just missed Luffy's departure until the woman cut her off. Need an explanation as to what I just saw? Yes, that would be most appreciative. Glinda said as her eyes were trained on the four. The four raised a brow at her mood until Kiro stiffened at the possible reason and leaned to Summer's ear. The kid never stretched his limbs since he got here, he whispered. His leader squeaked at that detail, realizing that he's right. Ever since Luffy got to Beacon, he had not once utilized his rubber body. He must have not found any reason to use it at all. Of course Glinda had to witness those strange abilities after learning that Luffy has no aura. The red-tipped woman groaned as she took her friend to their dorms to explain what Luffy told them when they met, again. It needed to be done, but the repetition was starting to get on her nerves. At least Glinda didn't immediately freak out like they have. Meanwhile, Ozpin stares out the window of his office. He lets out an impressed hum as he saw Luffy walk through the air itself. It's helpful to have someone who is self-reliant on their own ability as opposed to leaning towards technology. There's not enough people who use their fists as their primary weapon, and being able to stretch eliminates the need for a gun. You know, it would be so much easier if you just asked him about it. The lazy professor made himself known to the headmaster with his deadpan comment. His boss rolled his eyes at that. I'm just trying to handle this with a bit of tact. There's no need to demand answers from him so soon and make him uncomfortable. Ozpin's reason brought an exasperated sigh out of the professor. While he can agree that some things must be dealt with caution, this is not one of those situations. Uncomfortable. That kid doesn't look like the type to dodge questions. If you ask him, you'll most likely get a straight answer as long as it's nothing too personal. As things are now, you are just acting like a creep that's stalking his every move, he argued. Ozpin was shocked at the blunt description he was given, never once thinking that someone would have the gall to call him a creep. Although, he can't deny that watching Luffy as he plays his role as a student is a bit creepy. He simply wanted to see if the boy would show anything abnormal like his rubber body. Alas, none of the students gave him the need to exercise those abilities. At least consider my suggestion, headmaster. I have some annoying paperwork to get to before I can take my nap, the lazy man said before entering the elevator to leave, earning a chuckle from Ozpin for his complaint. As soon as it was just him in the room, Ozpin sighed to himself and then turned to face the window. He makes it sound so easy. I know a wounded soul when I see one, and I'd rather not carelessly tear those old wounds open. Ozpin said to himself. The former pirate king has been traveling over the seas for quite a while. Every so often, he would check Raftel's log post to make sure he didn't go off course. He may not be good with directions, but he understands how to use the log poses. It's as simple as following the red half of the needle. What more needs to be said? Droplets started to make contact on the strange compass, making him look up to see the beginnings of a torrential downpour. The dark clouds above him started to crackle with lightning while turbulent winds rushed through the air, which would usually fill any sailor with dread. Despite how bad the weather was turning out to be, Luffy grinned at the signs. Yosh, I'm getting close, he said to himself. He doesn't feel threatened by the winds beating against him, and lightning won't ever harm him and his rubber body. Besides, he has no choice but to get through this to get to the island. This ring of horrendous storms are always present around Raftel, but never on Raftel. It's like a barrier created by nature itself. He can hear the roaring waves below him, but they never got high enough to touch him. Luffy remembered how easily Jinbei sailed through such dangerous waters. He doubts he'll ever find a helmsman that can navigate through the wild waves without capsizing. Even the Grim have failed to breach these natural barriers. The ocean currents are ferocious enough to beat them back while the lightning bolts somehow snipe the airborne types out of the sky whenever there's a chance. It's good to see some of the New World's absurd weather phenomenon are still in place. Luffy continued to muscle his way through the storm until he noticed that the rain lightened up. The once turbulent winds toned down as well until it turned into a breeze. Knowing what this meant, the Straw Hat Kid peered into the horizon with a soft smile as he spotted the silhouette of an island off in the distance. The shores were primarily steep cliffs as opposed to the usual sandy shores. There was also a jungle so dense that he can't even see beyond the blanket of emerald tree leaves, concealing any bit of wildlife from a bird's eye view. The center of the island has a large cluster of mountains with flat tops that remind him of the ones in the Drum Kingdom. Aside from the Ring of Storms, it doesn't look so peculiar compared to the other places he has explored with his crew. He remembered how ecstatic he was when they finally reached Raftel in search of One Piece. But ever since he left their ship here, returning to Raftel over and over again has taken out the joy in finding it. Luffy forced himself out of his reverie when he recalled why he was here. His eyes scanned the cliffs until he spotted the familiar tattered flag that's connected to the mast of a ship with a lion-like figurehead. The ship itself has seen better days due to the lack of upkeep. The bottom of the ship was buried into the ground deep enough where it would stand upright without falling over on its own, but still allow the dock system to open up on the sides. The majority of it was covered in vegetation, but at least Luffy tends to remove them from the doorways. With countless years passing, he didn't want to take the risk of his precious ship sinking while he was away. Now it sits next to the cliffs while the figurehead looks out towards the sea that it once sailed. The captain of the ship landed by its side and placed a hand on it, frowning remorsefully at the state it's in. He never was good at keeping a ship nice and pretty, always leaving that to Frankie since he's the one that made it. All the paint was so worn out, you could barely tell what color it was before. Mortal creations may wear and tear, but nature is eternal. I'm back, Sonny, Luffy muttered before he stretched his arms up and pulled himself up to the deck. What was once soft grass now looked dead as it crunched under his feet. Scenes flashed through his mind as he remembered the times where he fooled around with Usopp and Chopper like a bunch of children, or when Nami and Robin are on their lounge chairs while Sanji brings refreshments to the two. No matter how painful it is to recall such memories, Luffy refuses to shed tears. His crew got to do everything they set out to do and lived out their lives as they pleased. For that, he can only feel proud of his crew. Living through the cycle of making and losing new friends is a different story, though. Having spent enough time on the deck, the former captain made his way below deck where the workrooms are located. The station for making Vivre cards is usually kept in Usopp's workshop since his focus is more on gadgets as opposed to the technology Frankie makes. When he reached the workshop, his eyes trailed off to the dusty jar next to his destination. To anyone else, it would seem strange to store bits of torn paper that seem to gravitate towards him as if it has a will of its own. Being able to live forever, he collected all the fragments of his own Vivre card that were given to his self-proclaimed followers. Seeing as he was going to outlive them, it would be a waste to leave those pieces be. Sure beats having any unsavory individuals know where he is. Not that they would know what a Vivre card does at this point. The last time I made a Vivre card, it was for that sneeze guy. I think he also has one of mine. Luffy tried to recall as he gathers what he needs to make Vivre cards. He even allowed the guy to keep the piece with him, as a sign of being close friends. All those adventures they shared as they scoured the world for dust. While Nicholas dealt with managing these expeditions, Luffy mainly handled the fighting. A simple, yet boring job. But it does have its perks, such as getting to explore the ever-growing kingdoms such as Vacuo and Mistral. Now that he thinks about it, Remnant seems bland in comparison to the world he lived in as a mortal. No enormous thousand-year-old elephant with civilization on its back, no town made entirely of chocolate, and no island ship that houses the largest entertainment city. After some time, Luffy finished crafting 4 sheets of Vivre card, one for each member of Team STRQ. The next thing on the list was to pack some clothes, and that was easily sorted out as he returned to the deck of the Sunny with a large backpack to hold his belongings, the Vivre cards, and other various things that he felt like taking with him. The last thing on his to-do list was going to take a bit of time. He used Skywalk to reach the mountains and searched their flat tops for anything different. He spotted the one he was looking for when he saw a staircase near the cliff of the mountain. He made his way to the stairs before climbing down a few steps until he was inside the hollow mountain. The staircase continued to spiral down into what seemed like a bottomless pit. Not having the time to go down the extremely long staircase, Luffy leapt off the edge and dived towards the darkness. It was dark for several seconds of free-falling until Luffy caught sight of extremely bright fireflies, and then the ground later on. The fireflies alone were enough to keep the bottom well lit. Shishishi, as bright as ever. Luffy chuckled at the fireflies as he softened his fall with Skywalk. When his feet touched the ground, he stared off to the center of this large space to see an old stone obelisk covered in moss. Faint breezes were the only thing from the surface that could reach this place as Luffy walked up to the obelisk and placed his backpack down before taking a seat in front of the structure. When this far down, his surroundings look like they're in a state of perpetual night as the fireflies seem like stars in the night sky. This singular structure serves as a sort of memorial for every person he was close to. No one is buried here since he permitted them to choose their final resting place. Some picked their own homes, some would choose the sea. Even if time has changed the geography of the entire world and distorted their burial site, they can still pass on with their freedom intact. But it's because of the changing world that they left this behind for their immortal captain. Hey guys. It's been a while. Luffy spoke softly with a tone of nostalgia. Even if there is no response, chatting like they're there helps ease the pain. He would always recount some of the things that were worth noting between each visit. I'm still managing to get by, as you can tell. Anyway, I got to see Ed again. I didn't think it was so long ago until I saw how old he looked. He even has a family of his own, all because I saved him all those years ago. He's still pretty strong, and smart enough to figure out that I live forever. The immortal captain started off, recalling an old friend of his. Along with Ed, I also ran into a team of huntsmen. You know, those guys with the cool weapons that hunt those stupid Grimm. They were pretty strong, and funny to be around. And then Ed had the idea that I should try to live for someone else. It sounds really silly to have a pirate like myself do something like that, but I still want to give it a try. After taking out the Grimm and a few bandits, I started to tag along with the team that I met. Luffy summarized the events that lead up to this point. Then his eyes shimmered with life as he thought about Team STRQ. First, there was this guy named Kiro. He drinks a lot even if his team yells at him for it, and he uses a sword that turns into a scyther gun. Although, I'm sure Nami and Zoro can beat him in a drinking contest. Luffy started by going through the initials backwards. Then there's his sister, Raven. She's always serious and takes pride in her strength, kinda like Zoro. Although, she's a lot better with directions than him. She also has this strange katana that can have different colored blades. Luffy continued, chuckling to himself as mentioned his first mate's lack of orientation. He could definitely see Zoro developing interest in her skills after shouting at him that he doesn't get lost. There's also Taiyang. He fights with his fists like me, and he always has the time to crack a joke. I don't understand why the others don't like them, I thought they were pretty funny. Luffy tilted his head in confusion at this. He gave up on finding a reason with a shrug, deciding that it wouldn't matter in the end as long as he thought it was funny. Finally, there's Summer. She's the leader of the team. She's super nice, but that just makes her super scary when she's mad. She also shoots glowing chains out of her wrists and wields 2 swords that turn into sickles. I've also met others like Witch and Ozzy. Ozzy is really strange, and Witch is always so serious. Luffy said, crossing his arms in annoyance of his high-strung acquaintance. Now that he thought about it, Summer and Raven were the only ones that showed their semblances. He's yet to see the semblances from the other half of the team. Thinking about Summer brought a small frown to his face as he recalled the times she requested to come here. Summer is also the first person that wanted to come here, although I don't understand why. I told her no, but now we've made a promise to bring her here at some point. Luffy stated with a somber tone. He doesn't really like the thought of bringing people here. Not only would it be difficult to get through the constant storms surrounding the island, this place is just really special to him. It's the only thing left to remind him of what he used to be. Raftel has largely remained the same while the rest of the world changed. Having an outsider here would feel like they're invading his sacred turf. Then again, those were the thoughts of the old Luffy. Not the mortal Luffy, but the immortal that was nothing but a shell of a great pirate. But, maybe I should show her this place. I'm about to live by their side for as long as they can, and having her meet you guys could be a good thing. She'd get to be the first outsider in Raftel. Luffy tried to look at the bright side of things, feeling a sudden spark of life in his eyes. He'll get to talk about his old friends for the first time in forever, causing him to beam at the thought. Saying nothing about his old life makes it sound like he's ignoring it, which was not his intentions. I couldn't help but feel so sad when you guys left. We were like family, after all. Now that I'm going to stay with them for as long as they can, why should it be any different from you guys? Luffy wondered to himself. Even as he started his eternal life, he still traveled with his crew despite the inevitable end. He simply forgot to accept the inevitability because an individual's life has grown to be brief in his perspective. Or maybe, he was just envious of mortals and the short life they've been granted, something he once had. They only have a small book to fill out, chapters full of wonders and different walks of life. He, on the other hand, has such a large book that there may never be an end. But as his story dragged on, its contents grew dull and colorless. The climax of his story was already over when he discovered One Piece. Why bother continuing to fill out his endless book when he could have fun adding stuff into someone else's pages? Well, I guess it's about time to head out. I may be out of things to talk about, but I'll have a lot more when I come back. Luffy ensured as he stood back up and patted the dirt off his shorts. He put the backpack on as he went over to the stairs, but then stopped midway. For a brief moment, he felt as though he was being watched. Behind him stood the many people that he met and befriended on his mortal journey. His crew were at the forefront while other varying individuals were behind them. Many were allies to the Straw Hats, some were once enemies, and some were rivals that later came to respect him. There were even a few that looked like they belonged to royalty. Law, the one that started his immortality, was leaning against the obelisk staring at him with an unreadable expression. While the enormous group were huddled around the obelisk as if to see him off, 2 men were right behind him. One was a blond man with a burned scar over his left eye wearing a top hat, while the other had a remarkable resemblance to Luffy and wore an orange hat with a beaded necklace around his neck. The 2 smiled at him as they reached out and placed a hand on his shoulders. Luffy's eyes widened and spun on his heel to face the obelisk, but no one was there. He blinked a few times before he shook off the vague feeling from earlier and launched himself up the stairs with Rocket. It took quite a while to reach the entrance. When he did though, Luffy noticed that the sun was starting to set. His stomach growled on top of that, causing him to pout as he considers staying here for the night. The eternal pirate was hoping to do everything in one day, but it couldn't be helped. He'll just have to wait until the next morning to head back. He leapt off the mountain as he made finding food his first priority. There should still be plenty of wildlife on the island. When his feet touched the ground, he was surprised to find it very soft. He got a closer look and noticed that it wasn't solid ground, but fur. Luffy stumbled slightly when he felt a shift underneath him, only to stare into the eyes of a goat. Except this goat is as tall as a two-story building, its back capable of carrying a couple dozen people on it. The two blinked owlishly at each other until a waterfall of saliva cascaded down Luffy's lips, earning a look of fear from the goat. He was lucky enough to land on top of his dinner. Having caught the animal by surprise, Luffy made quick work of the goat and brought it back to the Sunny to roast over a fire. He's happy to know that there are still absurdly large animals on Remnant, all isolated on Raftel. Were it any other place, he would only find normal-sized wildlife. And that won't be enough to satisfy his appetite. After he ate, he went up to the roof of the dome-shaped hut that makes up the crow's nest and laid himself flat on his back. He would have slept in the men's quarters, but being out here with the stars above him brings comfort to him. His eyes soon met the one mystery that no one truly understood, the shattered moon. All that they knew was that it was just before the Grimm made themselves known to the world. He remembered how he slept through the night like any other night, the moon still whole. Usopp had the night shift the night after and went up to the crow's nest, only to comically scream with his eyes out of their sockets. Everyone scrambled to get outside under the belief that they were in danger. Although not in danger, it was really eye-opening when they noticed a chunk of the pale object in the night sky shattered to bits. It must have been so mind-blowing that the newspapers containing the article didn't reach them until much later than it should have been. There was mass hysteria all around the world as rumors and speculations were being made to try and explain it. If anyone were to ask him, he believed that someone took an enormous bite out of it and then spat it out when they realized how bad it tasted. Luffy's eyes slowly drooped until they were completely shut, followed by his snores as he went into slumber. Hopefully he'll have a dream about food for once. As he slept, a glowing figure stood by his side and stared down at him with a soft and cheery expression. Its face may not be completely visible, but its bright yellow sailor's raincoat make it stand out in a place with clear skies. While its presence is usually an omen for the ship, it doesn't stop the Klabotterman from appearing before the last person that cares for the Sunny. Even as the ship's seaworthiness grows questionable, the Sunny will always be home to the Pirate King. He's not back yet, Summer thought with a frown on her face. With the ability to fly at incredible speeds, she would have thought that this trip wouldn't take too long. Just how far away is Raftel, anyway? Then again, he might have chosen to stay the night there. Her team was sent into Emerald Forest to tidy up the place. And by tidy up, they meant that they're hunting any high-class Grimm. It's pretty much a chore considering their skills, but this is for the sake of their juniors. Her teammates could only sigh at her sullen expression. It's only been a day, and she's already missing Luffy. Not that they could say anything about it since it does feel weird to wake up in the morning and not hear him snoring. Get a grip, Summer. He had every intention of staying with us, so he'll be back soon enough. Despite Raven's best efforts to lift her spirits, her words came out a bit harsh. I know, but I didn't think that Raftel would be so far away. Summer muttered softly as they kept walking. Speaking of Raftel, I combed through the entire library on anything about it. Kiro piped in, piquing everyone's interest. Even if Luffy could bring them, they'd like to at least know what kind of place it is. What did you find? Taiyang inquired, only to quirk a brow when the side wielder shook his head. Nothing. It wasn't in the books, nor was it in the database. It's as if it didn't exist at all. Kiro explained, confusing his teammates. Beacon was known to have records of any village that was established for historical purposes. Whether or not they're still populated by people is a different story. TCH, just another thing to add to the growing pile of questions that remain unanswered. Raven growled in irritation. How does a boy that wears his emotions continue to remain an enigma? His abilities outside of his rubber body, the origin of the devil fruits, and now the place where Luffy calls home. The four soon entered a clearing where they could rest their legs for a bit. Before they could do that, however, the sounds of heavy footsteps brought their attention. Looks like the Grimm found them first. Guess our negativity got their attention. Taiyang surmised as he raised his fists, ready for a skirmish. That or my bad luck. Kiro muttered with his hand on his sword. His semblance sure loves to screw with him. From the side of the clearing, a Deathstalker came through the brush with a Barangel by its side. To top it all off, Beowulfs were closing in from all sides as well. Things may look dicey, but it isn't anything they haven't faced before. The Scorpion Grimm made the first move by charging in as the vanguard, given that it's the most armored creature amongst them. The rest soon followed its lead as they encroached on the huntsman. Before the Deathstalker could get in range to swing its pincers, something landed on its back with so much force that its belly was forced to the ground and formed a crater beneath it. With its armor shattering from the impact, it let out a gurgling death cry as it got crushed before it disappeared. Both sides stopped to look at whatever landed on it, with Team STRQ looking flabbergasted at the events. Hi guys, I'm back. The dust cleared to reveal Luffy with a stupid grin as he held on to the strap of his backpack with one hand, unaware that he just destroyed a Grimm that's known for its thick shell. In his other hand was a torn bit of paper, which was inching its way towards them despite the lack of wind. Luffy. The team cheered, with the exception of Raven who grinned in amusement of his entrance. The boy smiled as he slid the Vivre card into his pocket, then took his backpack off and tossed it to Taiyang, who was caught off guard by the action and scrambled to catch it. Oof. Tai grunted when its weight made his knees buckle briefly before he stood back up. Just how much did he pack inside? Luffy chuckled at the blonde's struggles until he noticed a shadow looming over him. He craned his head up to stare in the face of a barangel, who let out a huff through its nostrils. Can I kill it? Luffy asked while pointing up at the Grim. The team simply shrugged their shoulders, not caring who kills the barangel. The specifics don't matter as long as Emerald Forest doesn't have so many strong Grim. The Gorilla Grim cupped its hands over its head and slammed them down on the Eternal Pirate, kicking up dust with the impact. When the dust cleared, there were no signs of a crumpled-up human, which confused the barangel. It then felt a weight on its shoulders as Luffy sat on top of it. The Straw Hat Kid had his hands on its scalp and chin before he twisted it to the side with incredible force. With an audible crunch, the barangel fell forward with a broken neck before evaporating beneath Luffy. These guys are so weak. Luffy complained with a pout. You're just too damn strong. Kiro countered with a sweat drop, with his teammates nodding in agreement. They should be used to it by now, but it's still crazy how easy it is for him to kill Grim. Two different growls interrupted them. One came from the several Beowulfs surrounding them, the other sounded like it was from Luffy. Oh, I'm so hungry. Luffy bemoaned as he held his stomach. I guess we could head back. We already got what we came here for. Although, Summer left her sentence hanging as she looked at the weak Grim. Weak as they may be, it's still time-consuming. Not only that, the first years need some Grim to train with. The surrounding pack of Beowulfs charged in to avenge their fallen leaders, urging the team to bring out their weapons. Luffy simply stood there with his hat covering his eyes, wearing an annoyed frown. It's been a long time since he used it, but it should be fine if the students of the academy could take care of them. With the effect it has on Grim, this ability would cause problems to the people around him. As the furious Grim charged, Team STRQ were left baffled when they suddenly slammed their paws into the ground to stop themselves. The killing intent in their eyes have been replaced by fear. The Beowulfs were shivering like scared pups as they stared at the boy. Oi! Luffy started in a low tone, causing them to flinch. Conqueror's haki may not knock them out like it would do against living things, but it can scare them away. Granted, it's not helpful if the Grim happen to encounter a town after running away from him. Get lost, Luffy ordered with a fierce glare focused on the dark creatures. Upon his command, the Beowulfs turned tail and scampered off towards the tree line. Summer and the others were at a loss as to what just happened. The clearing that was once full of Grim has gone silent in about a minute. It was even more shocking to know that the creatures out to kill humanity were chased off by a mere glance from Luffy. Those things looked like they were about to piss themselves. Yosh, now we can go back to the school and eat, right? Luffy beamed at them with his usual cheery demeanor, as if he hadn't scared the shit out of the beasts that no one thought could feel fear. The Pirate King blinked a few times when they didn't answer, only seeing their gaping expressions. What's wrong with you guys? You're being weird, Luffy said with crossed arms, oblivious to the reason of their shock. Isn't it obvious? The four shook off their stupor and yelled with shark teeth. Luffy, do you realize what you just did? You made the Grim afraid of you. Summer shouted with an incredulous look. Luffy tilted his head in confusion at the four, wondering if it really is that surprising. Well yeah, if they can get mad at you for hurting them, then they can get scared too. Luffy's simple explanation did make sense to them, but it was still unheard of. The only other thing that the Grim are terrified of are the silver-eyed warriors. But Luffy has no such eye color. Could we just drop this for another time? I'd rather not stick around and wait for them to come back. Kiro advised, scanning the surrounding area with a weary eye. Who knows when his semblance will strike next? Gonna have to agree with him. Although we do appreciate you dropping in to help. Taiyang joked, earning groans from everyone except Luffy, who laughed a bit. With the Grim hunting out of the way, the blonde handed over Luffy's backpack as the five made their way to Beacon. After reaching their dorm, Luffy placed his backpack on the floor before taking out the Vivre card to show them how it works. I already took a piece of Summer so I could get here. Watch, it'll move on its own. Luffy said with a childish grin, happy to show them something from his time. The four spaced themselves out so the other three won't get in the way of the demonstration. Just as he said, the Vivre card slowly slid across his palm in the leader's direction. The silver-eyed woman tested this further by moving behind him, only for it to change its course accordingly. You weren't kidding, but what if it accidentally gets burned? Raven wondered, intrigued by the weird piece of paper. It only burns when the person is dying, so you can't actually burn it or get it wet. It also goes back to normal when the person heals. Luffy gave the smaller details that were left out. The black-haired woman hummed in response, taking note that you can't easily get rid of it. It'd be a problem if it got stolen. But considering that no one really knows how it works besides the five of them, there's not a lot of risk. We'll worry about splitting up the Vivre cards later. Right now, I'm growl. Summer couldn't help but giggle when Luffy's stomach spoke for her. As they left Luffy's luggage behind, the team thought about the many untouched topics that surround the boy. While Raven would like all of their mysteries solved in one go, Summer preferred to take their time. She could see where Raven's coming from, but there wasn't a need to rush. And it's not like Luffy has all the answers. He's just as far from omniscience as every other person. But one thing she knows for certain is that this boy is here to stay, and she can't help but smile at the thought. Chapter 7, Disbelief. There was something that Summer and her team needed to be sure of. While Luffy is full of mysteries that have yet to be touched, Raven brought up a question that can easily be answered. Just how much stronger is Luffy to them? They've seen him fight, but only against things that they're confident in taking down themselves. Summer doesn't mean to brag, but she's pretty sure her team is the best in the school. So where does the best team stand when up against a hulking beast tucked inside a young man? They're pretty sure that they'll lose, and that's fine. What Summer and the others want to know is how big the gap is between them. Knowing that he's facing his new friends this time, Luffy tries to think of a way to restrain himself further. A single punch can knock both a person's aura out and leave them unconscious, so he needs to adjust it so he doesn't knock them out. The Pirate King would like to say that he came to a good answer, even though it looks like he's showing off to everyone else. Team STRQ panted heavily after their recent exchange while Luffy stood across from them, not even so much as winded. The only thing that's imbued with armament is his index fingers. And that was enough to defend himself from the onslaught of 4 huntsmen at the same time. What is up with that armor? Tai Yang cried out in irritation. It didn't matter how little there is, any bit of that black armor is strong enough to stop swords and bullets. It's not just that armor. It's like he sees our every move before we even act on it. Kiro added, sharing the blonde's frustration. They could come from behind him and he'd still understand their intentions. Come on, guys, you can't be that tired. I didn't even attack yet. Luffy whined. The 4 sweat dropped at the true statement. The fact that he hasn't made any effort to retaliate is even more scary. Then why don't you attack? And don't you dare hold anything back. Raven roared. Her team paled at her demands. Luffy sounded really serious when he said that his full strength would kill someone. Luffy stood there in contemplation, wondering how to appease her pride. He knows he can't simply punch her with no ounce of restraint, but to do anything less would be insulting. That and they really want to know how big of a gap there is between them. Much to their horror, the boy nodded his head in agreement to whatever he thought of. He lowered himself into a stance with his fist cocked back, making them wonder if he's going to stretch his arm. But he didn't even do that when he threw a punch with all of his might. The force of his swing was so damn strong that he created a tunnel of intense air pressure. Raven was knocked right of her feet and sent careening through the wall behind her, the wind almost pulling the rest in. The woman didn't even stop at the hallway as she smashed through a second wall leading outside. Seeing the damage done, the rest of the team slowly turned back to Luffy, sweating profusely in fear. He doesn't even have to touch you to send you flying. They can only imagine what would happen if that punch made physical contact. Raven, are you okay? Summer called out to her teammate from the other side of the hall. She got her answer when Raven slowly climbed up to her feet, wincing in pain with her aura being taken out. Her legs wobbled as she struggled to remain standing. It didn't last long as she fell forward with a thud after her legs gave out. So, does this clear up how out of our league we are? Tai Yang asked, sweating bullets at the notion of continuing. At that point, Glinda's head peered into the training room from the destroyed wall and glared at them. Do I need to ask? She wondered, feeling her eye twitch at the troublesome boy. She heard Raven groan beside her in response. Shishishi, sorry about that. They wanted me to not hold back, so I didn't. Luffy explained with a sheepish look. He forgot how air-compressed projectiles became a rarity. Back in his time, it was very common to see people launch such attacks with sheer force. Swords, legs, tails, even the flick of a finger. Heck, he recalled Zoro mentioning how the giraffe guy used his neck. Glinda could only sigh at this before she brought up her riding crop and telekinetically carried Raven back to the group. Luffy grew starry-eyed as he witnessed the woman later fix the damage he's caused, piecing the debris together like one big jigsaw puzzle. After everything was fixed, Glinda came into the arena through the door which happened to be next to the spot where the hole was. Let this be a lesson for us to take our deadly experiments to the forest. Glinda scolded them, but mostly staring at Raven. She has no doubt that it was her idea, what with her obsession with strength. Kiro's sister muttered a, fine, under her breath before she got back up to her feet with Tai Yang's help. She still feels disoriented from the impact, but that will pass with time. After parting ways with Glinda, they went to the cafeteria to sat their appetites after the grueling and unfair spar. While the team understand where they are in terms of strength compared to the Eternal Pirate, it doesn't explain how or why he got so strong. They doubt there was any Grim, much less a person, that was powerful enough to require such strength. The only lead they have are the other Devil Fruit users. Oh, that's right, Tai suddenly yelled, earning their attention. Luffy quirked a brow at his outburst as he took a bite of meat off the bone. The others soon realized that this is a good time to ask some of the questions that were left unasked. They could skip over the Devil Fruit's origins since Luffy doesn't seem the type to care about that. What's up, Ty? Luffy asked after swallowing, curious about his outburst. The four wore expressions that showed how difficult it was to bring up the disturbing topic, seeing as it pertains to Luffy himself. It's probably a bad idea to bring it up now, but it needs to be asked. We were wondering, what happens to the devil fruit after the user dies? Ty asked, suddenly feeling awkward about it. He's basically asking what happens to the gum fruit after Luffy dies, and that makes it harder to look the boy in the eye. Why couldn't he come up with an easier question? Luffy bore a slight frown at the question, eyes showing emotions that they couldn't quite pinpoint. He didn't seem suspicious, nor was he disturbed. The closest that they could describe it is melancholy. When the person dies, the power that they had goes into a fruit that it looked like before it was eaten. Like if it looked like a melon when you ate it, then it'll go into another melon after you die. Luffy explained as best as he can, his voice quiet and devoid of any cheer. Team STRQ couldn't blame him for having that tone with them. Odds were that he had friends with strange abilities before they passed on. God, Summer feels like an asshole for reminding him of his losses. So does that mean that you've kept one for yourself, despite the rest being tossed into the ocean? I'm sure there's someone that passed their fruit off to you, right? Leave it to Raven to be tactless, much to the other's chagrin. They're trying to avoid getting too personal, yet Raven has no qualms on turning this into an interrogation. They can only hope she doesn't push too many buttons, lest she gets sent through the wall again. At first, Luffy held a blank expression as Raven waited for an answer. Then he started to sweat profusely before averting his eyes. No, Luffy said before he tried to whistle with minimal success. Raven felt her eye twitch at the blatant lie while the others giggled. He can't even hold a poker face for a solid 30 seconds. Oh man, with a face like that, you have to be telling the truth. Kiro joked. See, Kiro believes me, Luffy stated while pointing at the man, bringing up more giggles for his stupidity. At the very least, this proves that Luffy does have a devil fruit in his home. With how diverse these fruits are though, it could be anything. Alright then, what do you think is the strongest devil fruit? Summer asked, her eyes gleaming in curiosity. Luffy leaned back in the chair and tilted his head in thought, combing through the long list of devil fruit users. There's not really such a thing as a fruit that dominates all other fruits, just those that are more devastating. Wait, why do you care about them if they're already in the ocean? Luffy just realized how mundane answering these questions were, causing the team to flinch. It wasn't like they'll be able to get it, so why bother? Just for the sake of knowing, I guess. Even if they're out of reach now, they were still a part of our history. Summer explained. To go on without acknowledging its existence would be nothing short of ignorance. Not only that, learning about the devil fruits would in turn give her insight on Luffy's life. He's the only one connected to them after all. Luffy simply shrugged at the answer, willing to indulge in her curiosity. Well, there was this one old man. He had this white, curvy mustache. He's so big that he can grab your entire head and crush it in his grip. Luffy's description of Whitebeard earned some raised brows from the four. Luffy has no reason to lie, as if he could anyway, but it's still doubtful that one man can be that huge. I haven't seen much of his devil fruit when he was using it, but I fought the bastard that took it from him. Luffy's mood went dark as he mentioned him. In spite of the shock that he has someone that he hates, Summer and the others were on the edge of their seats waiting for him to spill out the devil fruit's power. Okay, so what was their devil fruit? Raven voiced their impatience. They called it the tremor fruit. I don't remember all the small stuff, but I do remember that it allowed them to make earthquakes whenever they want. Luffy held a finger to the side of his head as he tried to recall such old memories. When he looked at the four, every ounce of color drained from their faces. What's wrong? Luffy tilted his head in confusion for their behavior. Kid, you've basically told us that there was once an ability that can wipe entire cities off the map. And you fought that guy and lived. Kiro said in disbelief, getting a nod from the boy. I did more than live. I killed him, Luffy stated with no regret. Summer went rigid at the statement. This was starting to be a little too much. The power to wield a natural disaster, the fact that Luffy was up against someone with said power, and then the admittance that he took someone's life. Sure, it was for the better, but she never would have guessed that this silly goof had done the deed. This is starting to make no sense. Raven muttered, garnering their attention. You're telling me that there was a person that's a walking, talking cataclysm. Something like that would have nailed history as the greatest calamity that Remnant has ever seen, with you as the hero that stopped it. Luffy felt an eye twitch at the thought of being called a hero. And yet, we have not heard a peep about it or you. What is it that you're not telling us? Raven got up to his face with an accusatory glare. This is where she draws the line on how much she believes. She believes in the existence of devil fruits and vivre cards because there is solid evidence to prove it. But there was never any signs of a catastrophic earthquake anywhere on Remnant's geography, nor was it publicized to show what the world suffered. He looks about the same age as them, yet his experiences are clashing with recent world events. Luffy was getting a little annoyed by Raven's persisting doubt, something the others noticed from his twitching eye. Even if I told you, you would never believe me. If you can't trust anything I say, then stop asking me things. Luffy told Raven off. His words brought any further questioning to a halt as they realized the point he was making. It's difficult to come to terms with the existence of mystical fruits as it is, and that was just scratching the surface. What are the odds of them trusting his word as they delve deeper into this well of knowledge? They have nothing but his word to go by since no other person in Remnant knows what he's seen. He decides what he wants to tell while they decide whether to believe it or not. If they don't trust his answer, then they'll have to suck it up because any additional details are just as unbelievable. I guess you do have a point. No reason to ask if we're just going to ignore the answer. Taiyang admitted as he rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. Raven crossed her arms in a huff, shelving aside some of her inquiries. The four were at a loss as to what to ask him now. So much so that they haven't realized that Luffy pilfered their food right from under their noses. 4 sets of eyes went wide as Luffy snatched up the last of Summer's strawberries and popped them into his mouth. "Ah, Luffy, I was going to eat those." Summer cried out. "You were, why didn't you say so?" Luffy tilted his head. The redhead slumped at the loss of her favorite fruit. Seeing as the self-proclaimed Pirate King ate their food, the 5 of them left for their dorm. Luffy has yet to really unpack his giant backpack ever since he returned from Raftel, and it's got them curious as to what exactly he brought with him besides clothes. As they traveled across the courtyard to reach the dormitories, Kiro started to trail behind the others as he pondered on what transpired. He wants to believe what Luffy told them, but he can't deny his sister's logic. If the kid was telling the truth though, then it would have happened long before their ancestors were even born. The only way that could happen would be if Luffy was. Wait a minute. Kiro's eyes widened at the theory before he spared a glance to the flask that Ed gave him. It's such a far-fetched notion, but it pieces so much together. The existence of Raftel and devil fruits that continues to elude humanity. Luffy's claim of being the Pirate King suddenly sounds just a teensy bit believable compared to being a possible mental issue. His strength and battle experience become more plausible to reach. Ed mentioned Luffy saving him, but they never asked when. If there's a fruit that grants the power of a natural disaster or phoenix, then it's not impossible to imagine a fruit that has the ability to extend or eternalize someone's lifespan. He ran a hand through his hair as a headache formed over the implications. He may be jumping the gun with his crazy imagination, but that's what they initially thought of the strange fruits. Kiro. He was taken out of his thoughts by Tai, bringing his attention to the other 3 who were staring at him with either worried or curious expressions. "Oh, I just realized that I haven't filled this with my favorite bottle of brandy yet." The man formed a believable lie, which worked given the series of groans from his teammates. Kiro thought about sharing his opinion, but decided against it. His little theory was nothing but conjecture with no concrete evidence, something that is necessary to convince his stubborn sister. The only way to know for sure is when Summer returns from her trip to Raftel. Before he knew it, they were in front of the door to their room. The first thing their eyes fixated on upon entering was the backpack off in the corner. "Oh, that's right," Luffy chimed as he dug into one of the smaller pockets on his backpack. It didn't take long until he fished out a small picture frame. Even if they can't put much trust in words, they can't deny it if it was a picture. Here, Luffy held out the picture frame to them with a cheery grin. Summer never thought that she'd see him more jovial than he usually is, but he surprised her. Taking it from his hand, Summer viewed the photo with great scrutiny while her team huddled around her. The photo itself looked really old compared to current technology, but it seemed to have been put through a lot of care in order to survive the passage of time. Their intrigue at that detail was immediately replaced with shock and bewilderment as they looked at the people in one of the photo. Luffy was obviously among them along with a few normal-looking people, but the rest had the most peculiar appearances. One with a long nose, another with curly eyebrows, there's even one that looked like a tiny tanuki. Then there was what appeared to be a cyborg and a hybrid between man and fish. What really stuck out the most though was the skeleton. "So, who are they?" Taiyang wondered, unable to describe what he was seeing. "They're my friends. The closest thing I have to a family besides my brothers." Luffy answered with a look of longing. His tone was not lost on them as they concluded that the people mentioned were long gone. "If you don't mind me asking, how could a skeleton die? Wouldn't it live forever?" Kiro pointed out with curiosity. Luffy was crestfallen at the notion, recalling how he thought that before. His name is Brook, and he ate the revive fruit. It brought him back to life once, but his body was nothing but bones by then. After that, we thought he'd live as long as his bones weren't smashed to bits. But, Luffy explained the powers of his oldest crew member. But, Taiyang raised a brow, urging the boy to continue. His body was still growing taller even though he's just a skeleton. If he was immortal, then there'd be no point to growing old. Luffy's statement was met with confusion as the 4 tried to make sense of it. Was he trying to imply that this Brook person was still going through an aging process in spite of his appearance? If his bones didn't shatter from an attack, then did they slowly decompose to the point of breaking? Luffy was getting real close to giving himself away with the signs of immortality. It was that reason why he didn't even age a second since that day. It also prohibited him from growing some manly facial hair, something that most of the men in his crew teased him about when they had theirs. Lucky bastards. He heard that Doflamingo's crewmate, Sugar, still looked like a kid thanks to her devil fruit granting immortality from the get-go. Bonnie was the only exception because her devil fruit allowed her to alter the age of anyone, including herself. Now that he thought about it, where could those two be? Did they hide themselves from the world? They couldn't have gotten killed by someone, they couldn't be that weak. Or maybe, they decided to join their mortal crew in death, believing that there is no better place than to be by their side. He doesn't have such an option since his was given by someone else rather than be a perk with the devil fruit. Law didn't give his life just so he can throw it away himself. Luffy. Huh. Luffy looked up to see the four staring at him with varying expressions. You all right there, kid? You were stuck with that blank stare, even ignoring our calls. Kiro pointed out, causing Luffy to rub his head sheepishly. It's nothing, he waved off. His lie was easily seen through by Team STRQ, but they left it be. Oh okay. Well, do you mind telling us more about your friends? Summer changed the topic to what she believed Luffy was trying to do in the first place. His eyes practically glowed at this, his grin reaching from ear to ear as he nodded his head vigorously. She has no idea why he reacted that way, but she wasn't complaining. This was the happiest he's ever been since they met, after all. The boy went for what felt like hours talking about each individual. Their likes, dislikes, quirks, the way they fought in battle, and even the dreams they wished to accomplish. In the case of the people he named Chopper and Robin, he'd explain the devil fruit powers that they had. Raven had to roll her eyes at some of the methods of fighting. She finds it hard to believe that the sniper, Usopp, used a slingshot to take out his foes. Same goes for Zoro and the strength to cut down entire galleons with his sword, or Brook's speed reaching a point where you can't even see his sword swings. Absurd or not, each of them were unique in a way that gave an advantage that others lack. Luffy was in the middle of telling them about some of Frankie's inventions before his stomach growled, cutting him off. Everyone looked outside to see the sun touching the horizon. I didn't even notice the time go by. I missed one of my meals. Luffy frowned at the thought of missing a chance to eat. Seriously, how many times do you eat in a day? Tai Yang wondered. 5. Luffy replied with a blank look. And yet you don't gain a single pound. Summer deadpanned with a faint hint of jealousy. It must be nice to eat without having to worry about your figure. Why don't you go on ahead and stuff yourself? That way you won't be talking with your mouth full. Kiro suggested with amusement. Raven sighed in relief at her brother's proposal. They would often be besieged by bits of food that Luffy sprayed while talking. For crying out loud, our tribe has better table manners than him. Raven thought. Summer was relieved as well, but only because Luffy wouldn't nab their food if he already ate. The boy cheered with glee at that before he hopped up to his feet and left the room with a spring to his steps. When the door closed, Tai quirked a brow when he noticed something. Was there something you wanted to say without him around? The blonde inquired. The girls turned to Kiro and waited for him to organize his thoughts. Yeah, I'd rather not pull a Raven and pry for answers, he said, causing his sister's eye to twitch in annoyance. Is something wrong? Summer was a bit curious as to what the side wielder observed. Whatever it is, he deemed it too sensitive to bring up to the one person that potentially had the answer. Best not to annoy Luffy more than they already have. This may not mean anything in the end, but where were the Grimm in all of his tales? He just showed us an old photo of his friends so he couldn't possibly be making them up. So, Kiro was about to continue before Raven held a hand up to stop what would be baseless conjecture. Brother, you can't seriously be thinking that everything he said was true. Will take more than some old photo to prove anything. Raven scolded her sibling for such foolishness, only to be met with a stern look from Kiro. I'm taking it with a grain of salt while considering every possibility. Yes, it's ridiculous to believe that Luffy fought a guy with earthquake powers. But it's also unbelievable that the Grimm were absent from his life, which is impossible because the whole world is plagued with them. Kiro's statement gave them pause as they thought about it more. They could have made the argument that the Grimm never posed enough of a threat to Luffy to be mentioned, but that would imply that there was something far more imposing than them. Without the powerful devil fruit users, what could be more dangerous than Grimm? Then there's the chance that his current strength is nothing compared to when he was younger, weak enough to think twice about fighting Grimm. Yet the Straw Hat Kid had not once made any comment about them other than that they're stupid, weak, and annoying. Raven begrudgingly admits that no matter how you look at it, there's no place where the Grimm could fit in. As if the one puzzle piece doesn't belong there. What could this all mean? Tai muttered in defeat, unable to draw up any conclusions. There's just no way that Luffy could have been around and not feel cautious around Grimm. Not unless he was already too strong for them. I dunno. That's why I want our nosy leader to go to Raftel. To see what exactly the kid has lived with. Kiro pointed out, much to Summer's shock. Huh, their leader stood in bafflement at the sudden support. So you're saying she should take note of everything she sees at his home to get a reliable assessment. Ravens failed to hide her intrigue. Guess her brother can have his moments. Not only would they get some answers, it also coincides with Summer's own agenda. And the redhead has no reason to lie to them. No offense to the boy, but his words alone can't convince her despite his inability to lie. Considering the amount of time she spent with either of them, it's easier to accept things from someone she's known for years. Their aforementioned leader contemplated on the idea. Either way, she still plans to travel to Raftel. But now it's more about seeking the truth of Luffy's origins than reaching the source of his nightmares. Although, it seems like I have to understand more about him before I could come one step closer to that. Summer thought. She can't necessarily make any headway on her self-proclaimed mission without the clear picture. I guess it can't be helped. But let's give him some time until he's ready to make another trip. Summer said, trying to be reasonable for Luffy. That's fine. It hasn't even been that long since he came back, anyway. Taiyang nodded his head, followed by the two siblings. Summer lets out a sigh of relief, thankful that they all agreed on a course of action. They can finally hold off on their questions, at least until she visits the island. With nothing more to discuss, Summer lead her team out to join their unofficial fifth member. With the head start he got, Luffy should be done by now. The rubber boy may have been too hasty. He was so focused on eating that he didn't consider how he has no one to accompany him. Food always tasted better when he's around friends, a fact that he recalled all too well from the untold amount of time he spent alone. Doesn't help that he hardly knows anyone in the school. He sighed at the conundrum he's faced with as he carried his tray of meat. There was so much food that the tray looked like it was about to snap in half from the weight. Luffy caught sight of Glinda sitting at one of the tables with schoolwork on one side and her own tray on the other. Without even asking for permission, Luffy took the seat across from her and plopped his tray down with a thud. The woman was too caught up with her work and got startled when she seen everything hop an inch off the table. She sighed upon noticing that it was just Luffy and his pile of food. Glinda would have scolded him about personal space, but thought against it as it would be a waste of energy. He'll just continue to follow the beat of his own drum anyway. You really need to balance your nutrition, Glinda commented dryly, sparing a glance to the tower of meat. Huh, what's so wrong about having a lot of meat? Luffy pouted. A lot of things, was all he got in response before Glinda returned to her work. Luffy simply shrugged at the diligent woman's answer and stretched his arm up to reach the drumstick at the top. Glinda tuned out the loud chewing that followed as she took occasional bites from the simple sandwich she had. As he chowed down, the eternal pirate looked around to see many of the students grouped into fours, most likely part of the same team. If teams tend to stick together, then why was Glinda on her own? Hey, witch, Luffy called out. What is it? Where's your team? Glinda felt her body freeze at the question, prompting her to stop writing on the paper. That's right, Luffy wasn't here long enough to hear about it. It was supposed to be a simple mission. Her team was to trim down the growing presence of Grimm that were getting too close to a town, a very common assignment. But then things went wrong at about every turn. There were far more Grimm than expected, the initial report didn't contain all the different species present, and the beasts' overall intelligence outstripped their expectations. The end result, a Pyrrhic victory. They still completed the assignment given, but it came at the cost of her teammates' lives. The only ones to return were herself and the huntsman they were shadowing. Why ask her about it, though? Just about every third-year student knows of the tragedy, even Team STRQ. Those four must have kept quiet about the whole thing for her sake. Luffy was worried when he saw the hesitation in her eyes. That look alone spoke volumes of what happened, knowing that he had that same look before. He recalls Ed telling him how new students would be shadowing a professional on their missions to gain first-hand experience. But being under the supervision of a huntsman doesn't guarantee the safety of the students. Disaster will rear its ugly head when you least expect it. If you really don't want to talk about it, then don't. I'm not trying to force you into telling me. Luffy spoke up before shoveling the next piece of meat into his mouth. Glinda was stunned at how understanding he was, believing him to be unreasonably impulsive. Not that she's complaining, though. Are you saying that you already figured it out? Glinda wondered, as that would be the only reason for Luffy to drop the subject so quickly. Not really. I just have a hunch. Luffy said with a blank face before he scarfed down the rest of his food, much to Glinda's shock. Was she really that distracted? In the end, he was just curious. He was completely in the dark of what happened to the rest of her team. She must have gave it away without saying a word, which made her wonder if he was secretly observant. She was honestly contemplating on getting the story over with before he cut her off. Whether or not he knew how sore of a subject it is continues to elude her. Either way, she appreciates him for giving her a way out of opening old wounds. Luffy was about to leave to get more food until he caught sight of Team STRQ as they sat down with their own trays. He saw the large helping of strawberries on Summer's tray and thought to help himself to some. The eternal pirate stretched his arm out to nab some, but his hand was caught by Summer before he could touch them. Luffy, you could get your own. Summer growled, her brow twitching in irritation. So much for giving him a head start. Stingy. The boy pouted. Being seated between the two as they stared each other down, Kiro looked at the rubber arm in front of him. Then he shifted his gaze to Raven, who happens to be across from him. She was too focused on finishing her food to notice the mischievous gleam in his eye, something that brought dread to Tai and Glinda. And it just so happens that the cafeteria is serving pie with an assortment of flavors. He scooped up the pie that he got and used it to make a slingshot out of the extended appendage. Luffy looked on in confusion as his arm gets pulled back with the pie loaded. Summer soon figured out what was about to happen, but was too late to stop Kiro from launching the pie at his sibling. They never even have to worry about her as she leaned her head to the side for the pie to whiz past her, earning an annoyed look from the culprit. Their relief over her evasion was short-lived as it splat against the back of someone else's head. "You're so predictably childish, Kiro." Raven smirked at his failed attempt. "Yeah, Kiro. If you didn't want the pie, then let me eat it." Luffy shouted with sharp teeth. The two sweat dropped at how he interpreted the exchange. "That's what you're mad about." The rest comically yelled. A shadow loomed over the table, gaining their attention. They turned to see Finch scowling at them, his head covered in what they assumed was the pie. "Who the hell did this?" he demanded, pointing at the mess on his head. "He did it." Luffy and Kiro didn't waste any time pointing fingers at each other. Luffy gapes at the man trying to throw him under the bus. Finch's eye twitched at the bickering that followed, with each side arguing about who's really at fault. As much as he doesn't like the kid that humiliated him, he can't help but take Luffy's side since he's become infamous for being a glutton. What kind of glutton throws away food? With a target in mind, Finch readied his own pie to exact retribution. Kiro turned to the man just as he reared his arm back, eyes widening in panic when he realized Finch was focused on him. He leaned back in his chair enough to dodge the pie, but tipped his seat over in the process. Kiro waved his arms wildly before his back slammed into the floor, eliciting a pained grunt. With Finch looming over them, the pie missed and splattered against the floor. A random passerby walked by without paying any heed to the mess on the floor and slipped on it, making their own pie fly out off the tray. The onlookers watched as the airborne object soon fell onto Kiro's face. Raven snorted at the misfortune her brother's semblance brought about. No matter what, he was going to end up with a face full of pie. Luffy's laughter rang out soon after, drowning out the others' snickering. Finch was confused by the sequence of events, but it worked out in his favor in the end. With his goal completed and no need to escalate things further, he simply left them to laugh it off. He may be cocky, but he's not belligerent. That and Glinda was never gonna let a food fight happen on her watch. Because of her, nothing significant happened as they cleaned up the mess. Although they were disturbed by Luffy's willingness to eat the pie off the floor. They were left surprised when they were greeted by Ozpin as soon as they left the cafeteria. The 5 students were worried when they saw a look of dread on his face, a complete contrast to his usual calm demeanor. Professor Ozpin, is something wrong? Summer voiced their concerns. He must have been stuck in his own thoughts since he perked up at the sound of Team STRQ's leader, his expression morphing back to something more relaxed. "Ah, I was hoping to find you here," Ozpin said, diverting the question. "In other words, you have an assignment that can be handled by none other than us," Raven remarked with a roll of her eyes. The headmaster sighed at his attempt to beat around the bush. "It is as you say, but I'd rather save the detailed briefing for tomorrow. It's getting rather late," he stated as he peered at the horizon where the shattered moon is creeping over, earning him nods of understanding. "Before you leave, I want you to understand that it's not simply because of your skill that I'm sending you off on this particular assignment. It's more due to our more recent discoveries." Ozpin emphasizes the word by turning his attention to Luffy, making the boy quirk a brow in confusion. Team STRQ had a sinking feeling in their gut when they pieced together what he meant. After all, how can Luffy be absolutely certain that every single devil fruit is in the deep depths of the sea? Disclaimer: this story do not belong to me. The author is Remnant's Eternal Pirate by RWBYpiece. The end.